What is up? Daniel here with the Virtual Robotics Studio, and it is finally time to wire the robot. So we need like lots of stuff. We may need additional things that I don't have out on the table yet. So keep your kits close at hand. And these parts, some of them came from the gray kit, some of them came from the black tote. But we're going to need kind of all the wire you can find. There are these SparkMax motor controllers. We need 5 of those, 1 for each of the motors that we're going to control. The power distribution hub, this is sort of like the main, main panel where our power is going to come in and then go out to all of our devices. And the other big thing that is going to attach here is the RoboRio. So that's in this NI box. And this is the brains of the robot. This is like our computer on board. So get that. There's also a main power switch that we're going to be using. So that's this one. Find that as well. And then there are a bunch of fuses, connectors, wires, lever nuts. And this Molex box has a bunch of different wires that I think is going to help us out. But we'll get to the specifics of that once we start connecting everything together. The other thing you're going to need is some material to make your electrical board with. So we're going to add some, in my case, wood to the top of the robot. And we're going to be able to use that then to attach all of these components to. The instructions for KitBot say to use 3/4 inch plywood because this is the same material that you're also buying anyway for your bumpers. I think you need maybe like a 4 foot by 4 foot section of this. I have two 24 by 48 inch panels. So I got roughly the same amount. It just came cut in half. I will say when you're looking to buy the plywood, find the flattest plywood that you can find, the nicest kind of flattest plywood you can find. It's going to make, especially the bumpers, a lot easier, but it'll help a little bit with the electrical board. All right, we're going to get rid of all this stuff, cut the boards first, and then get to wiring the robot. But before we do, let's give another special thanks to Argosy for making this all possible, to First and Andymark for parts and support, and to Team 302 Lake Orion High School for hosting our studio. All right, brought the robot back. Let's take a look. The idea is we're going to take pieces of wood and run them from this surface of the robot all the way across to this surface. So they'll kind of sit in this area. Now, we can get the width really easily. So we can measure across. And that looks like that's going to be 19 3/4 to go from edge to edge here. And then the trickier one to measure is the width. So if we go too far this way, we're going to crash into maybe the motors or the transmission. Will it hit the motor? Yeah, it eventually will hit the motor. We can't go all the way to the edge of this piece. And then, of course, we're going to hit here these churro pieces. So we can't go past those churro pieces. So the question is kind of like, about what dimension is that? So if I look from the edge of this to the motor, something like 6.5 inches. So on this side, I think we could have a 19.75 by 6.5 inch panel. On the other side of the robot, though, we definitely have more room. So because we could go all the way from this post here, basically back to the same motor. So if you wanted a bigger panel, this one could be, by 10 inches, 19.75 by 10 inches. I think in our case, because we're going to make this panel in the back, I don't know. We're going to make 2 of them the same. So we're going to make 2 6.5 inch wide ones. If you know you're going to be adding more electrical components or you know you need other stuff to mount on that piece in the robot, I would extend this front one as needed as long as you're not using any of the other space up here to attach stuff. So we're going to have them kind of attached towards the back because we want to have everything as close together as possible so that we can have the shortest possible wire runs. We don't want to add extra connectors if we don't have to. And longer wire actually has higher resistance, so that actually decreases the power available to your motors. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. There are a couple of other options. We're going to follow along with the way that the KitBot instructions were, which is placing it on top here. There are other options. You could, if you wanted to, place it down inside so it was lower down, sitting down on the rails on the inside here. Of course, if you're doing that, all of a sudden you need to be less than 18 inches so it actually fits inside there. Same thing on the front. And in theory, you could have a piece that even attaches on there and is one big piece, but you leave a cutout for the transmission so you can make it to the front. and I think you have enough room to clear the motor. So if you had like a rectangle, but then you cut out a little C here to clear this transmission, cut out a little box here for this transmission, and cut out a little box here for the battery, you could have basically a solid floor that goes all the way from front to back, and that will give you the most room to attach stuff. Unfortunately, like all those extra cuts and making sure it fits inside your frame, that's also going to be a little bit trickier and easier to have it not fit and need to take a lot of time on. The other potential solution for this year's game, just because the field is relatively flat, you could attach it instead on the bottom of that bracket. And right now, the wheels, we can actually just measure that to give you an idea. The wheels stick out from the bottom of the plate by 2.5 inches or so, which means if we stuck from here down 3/4 of an inch, we're not going to be below these belts, for example. So that's going to be, or we'll be maybe just slightly below these belts. So that's going to be kind of the lowest point of our robot, but we definitely have the ground clearances where the wheels are. So that could also be an option for you as well. That's nice because it does get your center of gravity a little bit lower. And it can give you, again, I mean, you still have to make some cutouts for stuff, but you could have one piece that is still connecting everything. That said, we're going to put it on top. It keeps everything nice and easy to reach and plug into, so we're kind of going for the easiest possible solution here. So our next step then is to get our plywood and cut 19.75 by 6.5 inches twice, one for the front and one for the back. All right, now let me get rid of the robot and we'll set up for our cuts. All right, we got our piece. We've got our saw. Again, if you have a table saw, probably even better to just rip the boards. Circular saw is probably the best hand tool to do this job, or a track saw if you have one. If you don't, see if you can get somebody that will let you borrow one. You can do this with a hand saw, and you can cut all the way through. It's kind of harder to stay on the line, and it is a lot more work, but that is an option if that's what you have available to you. Now, we've got our piece here. I don't know what size your board is going to be. Like I said, I have two pieces that are about 2 feet and just under 2 feet, 23 3/4 by, should be about 4 feet, and I'm pretty much exactly 4 feet in that dimension. So you might have one that's a 4 foot by 4 foot section. I'm not sure. If you do have one that's a 4 foot by 4 foot section, you have some other options available to you for how to go ahead and make these cuts. So what I could do, I have choices, right? We need 19.75, so that fits here. I could take 6 inches off the side, 6.5 inches off the side, and then cut it down, and then do another 6.5 inches and cut it down. Or we could do one long cut. Let's see, because the whole thing is 48, and we need 19.75. So 48 is more than twice that. So we could do one long rip at 6 inches, 6.5 inches, and then we can cut our two pieces down to size from that. That is less cuts, so that's probably the easier way to go. And I can get away with cutting either direction on my 2 foot by 4 foot board because I'm going to only make one set of bumpers when the time comes. But we do have this chart that shows if you had a 4 foot by 4 foot board, you're going to have to take a bunch of cuts for the bumpers and a bunch of cuts for the other size for your bumpers. And that leaves room on the other side of the board where you can make this 20.7 or 19.75 cut all the way along and have it fit. But if you're going to be making your stuff out of two 2 by 4 foot boards instead, there's not going to be enough room for you to cut the electrical boards the long way and all of your bumper pieces the long way. So if you're using 2 foot by 4 foot boards, you should do it across the board and take it off the end. The one reason why you might not want to do that, and I'll show you on my board is sort of questionable here, but if I put this sort of down on the edge of the table, you can see on this edge especially, that is not flat on the table at all. And I think if I flip this over, you will really be able to see kind of in the middle, there's a nice big gap here that is lifting up that I can press down to get rid of. Now that's not too bad, that's actually pretty small. I think if I spin it around, the other side's a little bit worse. Let's see how that looks. I guess it looks about the same. So we have this gap down here. And that means if I cut all the way across my entire piece from end to end, my piece will be a little bit bowed like this. Now, does that matter for what we're working on for this electrical panel? Not really. Once we bolt it in, the electronics is going to fit. This isn't like super bent. But if yours is super, super bent in that direction, then you want to make all of your cuts going the other direction, right? Because if I cut a strip out like this way, it's not bent this way. It's nice and flat on the table all along this edge. So if I take a cut this way, I'm going to end up with a flatter piece than if I cut this way. But for what we're doing, I think it's going to be OK. I don't think it's going to matter. So let's go ahead and do that one long cut. I think I like this side of my piece. And what we need to do now is we need to mark 6.5 inches on this piece. And again, if you have a square, that is one option for doing this. So I could actually set this. This would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 6 inches, so I would need to go a little bit farther. Alternatively, right, we talked about doing this before. You can use the tape measure to make your marks. So this is kind of the same techniques as when we were cutting the plastic, with one difference, and that is I do suggest using a really sharpened pencil because pencil marks are narrower than Sharpie marks. So that's going to help us be a little bit more accurate. So we can measure in from the side here. And remember, for me, right, we're going to rip with the saw. So I want to cut so that we end up at 6.5 inches. And there is a thing that some woodworkers do. It's still hard to draw a straight line at the 6.5 point. But I can do kind of like this, and that point where those come together is right at 6.5. So sometimes that's an easier way to visualize where you want exactly to be lined up. Now let's go to the other side of the piece here, and I'll do another mark at 6.5 just to make sure we're doing OK there. So we'll come in and then tick out right at 6.5. OK, so I have 2 marks at 6.5 inches. This is like our just checking line, right? So this line here is where we want the cut to end up. And it turns out if I line up on 6.5 inches here with my square, which I have checked is pretty square, it does not line up over here. It's like, it's a decent amount off. So if that's the case, you can just line up to your 2 points. We can do a line. We're hoping to cut somewhere around there. Looks like I missed. Let me try again. So yeah, this is definitely, the edge of my wood is not straight, is not cut straight. So I could try from the other end, but I think we'll be OK if I just line it up. And that seems good. All right. So we're hoping to cut about there. But because I'm just going to clamp this down and use it as a guide when I run the saw through, or I'll grab the other piece of box and do the same thing. We actually need this to not be at 6 inches. Or 6.5 inches. I need it to be 1.5 more inches in, plus like an extra about 1/16 of an inch in my case for the saw blade. So I'm going to set this to not 6.5, but we're going to go to 8 and 1/16. That did not give me a sharp point. OK, 8 and 1/16 on this side too. Looks good. And I will say too, like for some of our parts, we're trying to be very, very precise and very accurate. Honestly, this piece, if it's a little bit too long, it's going to stick off the side. It's not going to hit anything. If it's more than 6.5 inches, it's probably going to be OK if it's a little bit more. If it's a lot more, you might have to cut it down. But if it fits, it fits. And if it's a little too short, also not a big deal. OK, let me grab that bar that I used last time. And my issue here is if I use this as my track, when I get to the end, the saw is going to cut through the top of the square. So I can't use that for this step. And we're going to bring it so that, if you remember correctly, we want the line that we're cutting to be off the table, but we want a little bit of the area where we're clamping to be on the table. And this is, because this is thicker than the 1/8 material that we were cutting before, that plastic, this is thicker and sturdier. we can have less supported and it's going to be okay. Let's go ahead and clamp this in. Line it up on this side too. So this is my 8 and a 16th hole. Oh, if I remember, this has to be, I got to get this clamp way out of the way. I don't know, that is not going to be far enough. Let's move this in as far as we can, and we'll see if we can get away with it. And I think, I already know the answer. The saw doesn't fit, right? The saw does not fit. Okay. Let me upgrade to a longer piece of box. Pretty sure I did the exact same thing when we were cutting the plastic too. All right, well, eventually I'll learn my lessons. Line it up. And now this one we have room to go much farther over. Still get it lined up. And that box is not moving. Okay, and we can check too, what is my dimension here? 8 and a 16th. What is my dimension here? 8 and a 16th. So we're good to try to make this cut. I'm going to do the same technique I did before, which is I'm just going to kind of like hit the edge and make sure I'm lined up in the right spot. I can see from my guide here, it's close, but I don't know exactly how thick the blade is, and that can make some differences here. So that is pretty much centered on the line. We wanted to keep the line, but if it ends up a tiny bit short, that's not the end of the world. I'll just adjust it. I'll just slide this out a couple of hairs, and then we'll squeeze it back down. And we'll go with that is going to be close enough. All right, so let's go ahead and rip this all the way. And now we got sawdust everywhere. All right. Then we can kind of move this piece out of the way, the big piece out of the way. And we'll get to that pile of sawdust in a second. All right, now we can double check that we are about 6.5 inches. And like I said, we are just about 6.5, just a hair under. So my last adjustment wasn't quite perfect. All right, now we need to turn this into two 19.75 inch pieces, 19.75. Okay, so we'll measure in from the side. Find ourselves 19.75, right, 19.75 right there. And then on this side, also looking for 19.75. There we go. All right, we can cut on this side this time. Kind of line it up. Oh, wait, yeah, well, let's go ahead and draw the line for our 19.75 here. So that's about where we want the cut to be. And in order to have our, hey, you know what? The end of this doesn't have to be super square. So I could do it again and clamp the stuff down. I'm just going to freehand this cut because I think it's pretty short. And we know if it's a little bit too long or a little bit too short, this one definitely not going to matter, especially if it's a little bit too long, it's not going to matter. So let's clamp this on off the table. And I should be able to cut relatively straight, right? Okay, so we're going to line it up. Longer an error is better than too short, because eventually if it's too short, we won't have room for the holes. but I'm going to try to be exact, but I want to keep this line. So I'm going to bring the saw in until it's just on the other side of that line. Let's see how we did. Also careful, of course, with the cut pieces. There are splinters everywhere waiting to happen. That is pretty much right on. I'll take it. It looks square enough to me. So there's one. We're going to make a second one. And I'm going to flip my piece around. I'm going to cut from the other factory edge for this one. It's a little bit less chewed up by stuff. Well, I'm not going to flip it around, but I am going to measure from that side because I still want the long side on the table when we go to cut it. Okay, so let's measure out once again. 19.75. 19 3/4, right there. 19 3/4. On the other side of our piece, 19 3/4 is right. That's fine tape measure. You can do that right there. All right. We can line it up. Actually, it looks like from our cut, it's pretty square. Or from the edge of the piece, this one is pretty square. All right, so we've got our line. Let's double check. That is 19 3/4. Yep, so we gotta try to leave the line and cut the rest of this off. Make sure we're off the edge of the table here. Okay, and I'm going to work in until I get just next to the line. There we go. Let's see. That is, yeah, pretty close. I think it did an all right job. We got two pieces. They are, yeah, pretty much the same size, which is what we were going for. All right, next step, I'm going to get rid of all of the sharp edges. If you have a sander, that's great. That's what I'm going to use. If you just have sandpaper, you can do that. If you don't have sandpaper, get your finest file, and you can sometimes get close enough. At least take off the sharp edges that way. But let's go ahead and sand these. So I'm just going to try to knock down all of the stuff that's sticking up on this side, and then I'll hit the corners and the edges. Okay, that's pretty good. I think I at least won't get splinters from these now. Obviously, there is some tear out from the way we were cutting them. We don't really care how these pieces look. So if you get some of that extra damage on the edges, it's not a big deal. There are techniques that you can use to try to clean it up so you don't have those same issues. But again, I don't think it's worth the trouble for what we're doing. Just whatever saw you've got, go ahead and make the best cut you can make. All right, obviously covered in sawdust. I'm going to vacuum up, clean this area up, then we'll come back and get these installed into the robot. Cut our two pieces. They're cleaned up. We've got our robot back. And we can sort of just visualize where these pieces are going to go. So we're going to have one there and one there. And I think what we want, we're going to need wires that go from this board back to this board. So if we spread these way out, those wires aren't going to reach unless we add more connectors and more things that we don't want to add. So we want these to be basically as close as we can, but you probably will notice if you're following along, and you might be able to see this a little bit, you can see on the edge here, if I slide this all the way over until it touches the transmission, it is lifting up off the ground or off the frame. And what that means is we are actually climbing on top of the motors as we do that. So we want to get as close as we can, but we don't want to actually be on the motors. So I think it's going to be about maybe 3/16 of an inch off the edge is where we're going to maybe try to line this up. And let me grab calipers here. We can go ahead and scribe a line really quickly at 3/16 just so it's not me telling you, just guess, it's about here. So I'm going to set my calipers to 1.875. That's 3/16 of an inch. Let me see, is that close to where we are? Oh, that's really close to where we are. All right, so if I scribe 3/16 on this one, like that, and 3/16 on this one. Remember, if you can't see when you're working at home, you can color the area in with a Sharpie. This one I can see well enough, but it also doesn't really matter if I miss by a little bit. So I've got those lines now, and I'm going to line up my board on those two 3/16 lines. And now our next problem is we need to drill, and we need the holes to match the holes in the frame that are below this board. And I only kind of know where those holes are. I don't really know where they are. But luckily, on this side, we have the two belts on the outside here. So we can trace the holes that way. So if I clamp this piece in now where we've got it, I had one clamp on each side. That should hold it pretty securely. Then we're going to be able to flip the robot over and at least start the drills, start the holes. I don't know if we can drill all the way through without a longer drill bit. There are a couple of other ways you could do this potentially. If you have an extra frame rail lying around, you could maybe line it up on the top here. We have those extra cutoff pieces. These have the hole spacing that we're dealing with here. So in theory, if I put this on top and I drop bolts through these two holes, here and here, then the rest of it should also be lined up, and I could use that maybe to guess where a hole is. That's not a bad way to do it either. And then the same thing, if you have more of this pre-drilled one by one, those holes are also going to line up. It'll be every other hole. But you could rest that across both of these, drop in a couple bolts on either end, and then kind of clamp everything together and use those holes as a guide. But easiest way, if you don't have any extra stuff, is I think this. So let's go ahead and get this tipped up on its back here. That was close. All right. Other piece of wood is going to fall, so I'm going to take that out. And we're supported on something nice. Looks good. And we can see from this side the holes that we want to drill. So it's in the outside channel here next to the wheels. The reason why I clamped the board up on this side is because I have the belts both to the outside here. So there's room for me to try to get the drill in. Now, what I'm actually going to do is drill this one and attach it on the top and then drill down here again and then attach the second one here. You could drill here, but as you can see, the belts are kind of in the way. And it's going to rub on the belts. So if you have to do something like that, you need to find something that's not your finger. And you can go in there and you can pull these belts just enough out of the way to maybe be able to go and drill the holes too. But because we have so much more room on the bottom, that's where I'm going to be working. Okay, so let's chuck up our, this is a 201 drill bit, number 7 drill bit. And I want as much length as I can get. So I'm only going to put a little bit of this in, maybe 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little over 1/4 of an inch. And the idea here is that we're just drilling into wood. Wood's pretty soft. We don't need to have a great hold on this for it to work out. So we should be able to do that. They also do sell drill bits that are longer, right? So if you bought a longer drill bit, that would be great. They sell even super long drill bits, which you probably don't need here. One size up from sort of the standard size drill bit would probably be the best thing here. But I can see I can get the hole started, but I think my drill is going to hit the frame maybe before I make it all the way through. But that's OK. If we have a bunch of holes started, when we take it out, we can just clamp it on the table and finish those holes up. And what we're looking to do here is add at least 4 bolts, 1 on each of the spots. And I'm going to continue using the same button head 1.5 inch long bolts that we used kind of to hold the frame together. Obviously, I have a lot of extras of those because I used rivets in a lot of places. If you didn't use rivets and you're out of those bolts, this is a situation where you're going to have to run to the hardware store and buy a few more. Now, if you are going to the hardware store to buy more, this is probably 1.25 inches would probably be long enough because we're going through the 3/4 plywood and a 1/8 wall of the aluminum. And then you need a little bit more. So if you do 1 inch, there might not be enough room for the nut to fit on the other side. Or you just keep buying the 1/2s, and then you have spares that work anywhere on the robot. OK, let's see if we can get a hole started. So we want 4 holes. Really, I'm happy if I get I'm just kind of looking to see how much my overlap is. Basically, I think I'm going to trace the first 2 holes on the bottom and the first hole on the top. The second hole on the top I can't get to. And I'm pretty confident that if I'm lined up at 3/16, that top hole is going to have enough material around it. The bottom may or may not. It depends on how long you cut this piece, if you're a little longer or a little shorter. And so if it looks like that hole is too close to the edge, I'll just go ahead and use the second hole instead. So let's try the very bottom hole first. That's going to hit the wood. And I'm going to drill basically as much as I can until I hit the frame. OK, that's it. We did not make it all the way through. I'm going to do the second hole up from the bottom. Same thing. And then I'll hit the top one up here. And that one, I barely could do anything before hitting the frame and the wheel. But that's OK. Again, we're just trying to mark the holes. We can finish the drilling later. All right, let's take a look at the other side now. We're going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to start on the very bottom hole on this side. And we'll go as much as we can. So it hits. Second hole, just in case the bottom hole is too low. And then we're going to go to that top hole up here, which we know we can barely do anything with before it hits the wheels and everything. All right, stop there. We can go ahead and, I guess I'll leave it tipped like this. I'm going to unclamp the piece of wood. And we can sort of inspect it now. It should be pretty clear that, let me put this somewhere where I can drill all the holes too. And grab a couple clamps for that while I'm talking. It should be pretty clear that on the one end, the hole looks pretty nice. This hole here and this hole here, definitely for sure good. I can use those holes and not be worried about it. On the other end, it looks a little bit closer to the edge. So maybe my piece was just slightly short. I'm not sure. I think I could use those end holes. But since I have it out and I have all of the holes started, I'm going to drill all of them through. And if I start on the end hole and it starts breaking, I won't have to take it out to re-drill the other hole. I'll just have the hole ready to go. I could drop a second bolt in if it becomes a problem. So we're going to now just trace these holes through. And do your best to drill straight, but it's going to kind of be OK. And then the other side. Yeah, so close. If our drill bit was just a little bit longer. All right, so those are looking good. I am going to do something before I unclamp this. I'm going to mark this side. This side is D for down. Because this is the side where I know all the holes were right against the aluminum when I drilled. If I drilled crooked, the other side might not line up. And it's okay if the bolts go in crooked, as long as the holes match on the bottom, we should be able to make it all the way through. So when I go to attach this to the robot, I'm going to have that side facing down on the robot. So something like this. And we should be able to find a good place to attach that. All right, I'm going to set this one aside, and I'm going to get the other one. And I'm going to attach this in exactly the same place that we did the first one. So I'm going to take the edge up to my scribe line. That was like 3/16 from the edge of the piece. And I'm going to do my best just to line the wood up with the edge of the aluminum as well. I would say if you have 2 people, this probably works out. If you have 1 person, your life is going to be easier if you flip the robot back up first, because the piece just keeps trying to fall down on me. But it is doable. I think we got that side started, and now the second side is easier. All right, I'll go ahead and clamp that in. And we're going to get those holes started. We're going to do the same set of holes again. So very bottom hole. Second hole. And then the top one just a little bit that we can get before it hits stuff. Same thing. We'll do the top one just a little bit before it hits. It almost starts hitting stuff. It's very close. All right. Don't drill the wires. And the bottom hole. Okay, let's go ahead and unclamp that board. And we'll bring it over here and go ahead and do our drilling the same way. That's not going to work. Let's go over here. That'll work. Okay. And again, you can see this one not too bad. This one is really, really close to the edge of the piece, to this edge. So there's a good chance we'll end up utilizing that second hole that we prepared. Okay, let's trace these through. And go ahead and unclamp that. Bring this one back over here. Also, yep, I haven't flipped it over yet. This is the side that is going to be down. Okay, now we tip this up. And, well, looks like there's no hole in a couple of the spots. And that's just because the plywood part of the plywood is, or one of the plies of the plywood just kind of bent out of the way. So you can either break that piece out of the way or kind of break it out of the way with the drill, your choice. With your hands, with the drill, with a pair of pliers. Okay, so we should be ready to bolt this in now. And our bolts can go either direction here. In this case, if I drop a bolt down this way and it goes down through the frame, it's not going to hit anything. But on the front one, what we have to check is if we drop that bolt down, sorry, we know it goes this way here. If I drop this bolt through and through the hole, that bolt is rubbing on the belt. It's touching the belt here. So let me see if I can do it on the other side too. Maybe it'll be obvious or more obvious on camera. So if we drop that through, black bolt, black belt. But we are making contact right there. So it is able to touch it, and you can see just a little bit of wiggling, it's making the bolt move. So that would be bad. If we were running our robot this way, and the bolt were dragging on the bottom or on the top of the belt is not going to survive. Okay, so we obviously can't run the bolt this direction without doing something else, because it hits. You can maybe, I mean, especially on this side, it'll be really easy to reach underneath and run the bolt going the other direction. Although the one right next to the wheel, man, that's with the churro pieces there, like it's probably doable, but it's very hard. Our problem is there is no way to get this hole from underneath without disassembling our robot. Maybe if you're really good about bending the belt out of the way, you can do it. That feels very difficult. So I think, maybe it's doable. I think I would recommend though, yeah, we can do it. So we might try to do that. That's not easy to get in though. You got to go around the belt. I would recommend probably if you can get 1.25" bolts, those will stick down just fine and not hit anything. We have one other option though. If you just want to keep everything the same, we can use some washers. So if I take, I don't know if one washer is going to make me comfortable enough, but if I put one washer on here, when I go down, it's sitting a little bit higher. It looks like it's still just barely touching. So to be comfortable, maybe you're going to need 3 washers or 4 washers on this bolt. So if I do 3 washers and then drop it in, I definitely see clearance now. So that is another option on some of them, especially like maybe for these ones that you can get going upwards, we'll go upwards, but maybe on this one that's very, very hard, just know that you have the option to do maybe 3 or 4 washers on this bolt. I think I'm more comfortable with 4, but 3 should probably be okay. And that should give you plenty of clearance then to the belt. Yeah, 4 washers for sure is comfortable. But I will also say too, like when the bolt is going onto the wood, a lot of times you want to use a washer anyway because the bolt can dig into the wood because the wood is not that hard of a material. So having washers there to spread the load out is potentially going to make it a little bit better anyway. All right, so we're going to do a combination of washers and maybe doing upside down bolts in order to get these panels attached. Okay, which one do I want to do? Let's do the easy one first. Let's do the back one first. And I guess they're the same, so we can attach this one on the back here. And this one, because there's no belts for me, if you have belts back here, obviously you have to do it differently, but I have no belts. So I can just drop all of these down from the top, and it is no problem. And I'm going to do the first and last hole, and I'll do the first. And that last hole looks, you can see that one is hitting the edge of the piece. That's kind of what we were talking about. So that was right on the edge, and then when I drilled a little bit crooked the other way. So I'm going to use the second hole back there instead of the first hole. And I am going to put 1 washer on all of these just to make sure we don't wear into the wood at all. If you don't have washers, you should be fine. It will still work. Okay. And on this side, I think I can use the last hole. Looks good. Now we've got to get the nuts started from underneath again. So this is another situation where, I'm going to reach under with my finger and try to get it lined up on it and start it turning. And once it gets started, we're good. So that's one there. This one is definitely harder. But if I lift the bolt up, then I can slide it underneath nicely. Cool, that's 2. And then I'll do the same thing on this side while we're at it. One trick with the holding it in place with the finger, sometimes it feels like it just won't go, like the threads aren't lined up. If you spin it backwards, counterclockwise instead for a second, and then go back to spinning clockwise, sometimes that helps line it up. All right, let's start tightening these. And we got a long way to go. Wait, that's loosening. That's tightening. There we go. You there yet? There we go. Okay, and then this one. That'll do. back here. Oh, because I did the back hole instead of the second hole. That's unfortunate for me. I need a shorter Allen wrench because it's hitting when I go in to do it the long way. See how much I can do with the short side. We're getting there. Oh, okay, gotta move the wrench. There we go. And that is good. Last one. I guess last one for this board, and then we have 4 more to go. That's good. Oh, that was probably a little too tight. That's okay. All right, let's get our other board here. Sort of the same problem where some of the top layers, top plies, just kind of bent out of the way instead of drilling. Just kind of peel those away until they line up. That's going to make it not pretty, but oh well. All right, now, what do we want to do with these ones? Man, and then reaching the Allen wrench up from the bottom seems really hard. So the more I think about this, the more I think let's just stack washers. So there's 4 washers, which we said was very comfortable. 3 probably enough, but you gotta check for your own, because washers are not necessarily all consistently sized. Their thickness might not be exactly the same as mine. This one, I think I learned my lesson. I think the second hole I like better than the first hole because I can spin the Allen wrench the long way and have it clear everything. All right, and one more back here with 4 washers. And then our last one. All right, let's get these front ones tightened down. Well, I guess technically these are the right side ones. See if we can get that nut started. This is, again, one of those tight spots. You can use the tape trick again that we used in a previous video if you need to. There's something, okay, yeah. There we go. There we go. And if I can get the bolt up out of the way, I should just be able to put this on the rail and slide it over until it's lined up and just sort of wiggle it around, feel where the bolt is. And let's start tightening. Yeah, second hole's the winner because you can do this. You can't do this with the first hole because it hits the back wall. Well, with my Allen wrench, you might have a different length Allen wrench. All right, that one's good. Let's get the front one going. I mean, this I guess technically is the back one. The middle one. Looks nice. Got to put the nut on first. I will mention too, kind of as we're doing this, you can have these boards outside of the robot and start doing some of the wiring work on them or mounting the components on them outside of the robot, especially if you kind of watch this video to the end and see where everything is going to get attached electrically. But I like doing it in the robot where we know where the stuff is, because then for sure all of our wires are going to line up and they're going to fit and stuff like that. Because we're going to have a lot of pieces that are mounted on one of these two wooden boards but connect to something on the other board. And then also on the backboard, we're going to have the wires coming from the battery that need to connect to stuff that's going to be mounted on that board. So just to make sure that some of the wires are long enough, it's nice to wait, but at the same time, you are in a hurry to get the robot built. So if you have extra people and they want to get started on wiring, that is a possibility. Okay, last one is in, and it is tight. Okay, we've got our two boards attached. They are not touching the motors. I can actually look down and I can see just a little bit of daylight here between the motors and the panels, so that's good. We have our two battery wires here, which we'll be able to kind of bend around and reach up on top of this board when it comes time to do stuff with those. So I think I am ready to clean up all of the shavings of wood. I'm going to get rid of the bolts and that hardware, and we're going to bring back our electrical components, and we'll start laying them out and see if we can find a good place for them to all fit. Okay, the big components we have to add to the robot, as we talked about before, let's go ahead and unbox them now for real. This is our RoboRio. So the main computer here. This is going to need power. It's going to need CAN connected to stuff. And it's going to need the robot signal light connected to it. And the Ethernet port. Okay. And I don't know, I'm just going to set that on one of the pieces of wood. Let's go ahead and open up this is the Rev PDH, or Power Distribution Hub. We're going to take everything out from that. There is a long USB-C cable. Don't lose that. We're going to need that when we start updating firmware and setting up all of our devices. And then we're going to use today some of these fuses. So keep the little bag with fuses here. All right, and then inside of the SparkMax boxes, these are our speed controllers. So the power distribution hub is where the main power comes from. It sends that power out to our individual speed controllers. The speed controllers get basically talked to by the computer, the main computer, the RoboRio, and that will tell these how much voltage, how much power to send to the motor. So on one side of these, we have a V plus and a V minus. That's going to be where we hook into the power distribution board for 12-volt power or battery power. Then the other side, we have three wires labeled A, B, and C. And those go to the motor. Now, we're only going to use the red and black motors for ours, or wires for our motors. The white one is needed if you're using a brushless motor, but the motors we're using are brushed motors, so we're only going to use two of these wires. The last one's just going to hang out on the side. There is a Neo motor in the kit of parts. I think it was in the gray tote. That one is a brushless motor, so for that one, you would need to use all three wires. Okay, for each of these, as we start taking them out, though, there's a few things that we're going to do. So in addition to the speed controller in the box, we've got another USB-C cable. We're going to have a lot of these. There is a black and white wire. This is if we're going to do PWM control. That stands for pulse width modulation. That's one way that the main computer can talk to our speed controller. We're going to do CAN control, though, which stands for Control Area Network. And that means we need the green and yellow wires. And on the side where it says V plus and V minus, there is a USB-C port, and next to that is CAN/PWM. And this plug, it'll only fit one way. There's like two little grooves on the bottom, and that has to be facing down. Or the side that you can see the metal contacts from the wires, that should be facing up. And that's going to plug right into that CAN/PWM port. And it can be a little stiff. Make sure it's plugged in all the way. If you have to use a little stick or something to poke the ends in, go ahead and do that. We're going to do this with each of the 5 speed controllers as we take them out. Then each speed controller has a little hat, a little plastic piece that will fit inside here. We're not going to be plugging anything into that port, so you can just cover it up so aluminum shavings or things don't get inside there. All right, so that's one. The other two things I'm going to put back in the box to save, or maybe I'll put all of them in one box so I don't have to save all the boxes. We're going to do that again 4 more times really quickly. So I'll do one more example here. Also, there is this clip piece. We're going to need those clips, so save that clip. off on the side as well. Okay, one more time, put the hat on the top. And I think those fit either direction, so if it doesn't go in though, flip it around. Then on the side with V plus and V minus, we're going to take our green and yellow cable and plug that in. That's a little stiff. There we go. All right, I'm going to do that 3 more times, and then we'll come back with the finished speed controllers. Okay, we've got all 5 SparkMaxes set up. I think you have 6 in your kit, so we only have 5 motors on the robot. We got 1 extra. Update though, I did on a few of these I used the flat end of my Allen wrench to just kind of push on the connector on each end. A couple of them were very, very tight for me. So if you have to do that, that's okay. You could probably get a flathead screwdriver and push on the sides as well, and that would work. All right, we got 5 of these clips. These clips are going to help hold together when we plug these into each other. Those clips are going to be able to go on to hold them from coming apart, so we'll need those. And I've got the bag of fuses here, which I'll just kind of put off on the side. Okay, and the last piece was our power switch. So let's slide the robot over and see if we can find good places to put everything here. So let's see. It seems like, okay, basically the battery is going to plug into this, and then these wires are going to need to go to the power distribution hub and the power switch. And then the RoboRio kind of is on its own. It has to connect to everything, but we're going to have to run custom wires to that, so we don't care too much how long those wires end up being. And then we've got all of these that have to connect to something. And the one side is going to connect to our wires. And I think no matter where I put this on the boards, the wires on our drive motors are long enough that they're going to reach. So we don't really care where those end up for the drive motors. This one, though, our roller motor, this is coming down from the top. This is pretty much only going to reach if we're sort of right on the edge of the plate here. So maybe I want to put the RoboRio on this side, and we'll figure out what orientation we like. And we can put our SparkMaxes over on this side. Now, the other side of the SparkMax speed controllers, the red and black wires, ultimately are going to have to go into these ports on the power distribution hub. And essentially, you lift up these orange things, and they're going to slide in. Well, we got to strip the wires first, and then we can close down. But I'm just going to kind of be like, so they have to be like there, which means if this is on this side and the power switch is over here, I have no chance of reaching. We would have to basically add another wire, connect another wire to this, and run that wire over. And if we can avoid extra wire connections, we want to. So maybe this goes on this side. Actually, maybe then the main power is going to go through here and connect to this. So maybe the power distribution hub has to flip around, and maybe our power wires from our battery can also flip around. And go in from this side. So one of them, the black wire, needs to just get right into here. So that is limiting us as well. Maybe if I move the red one out of the way, let's see how much we can really do here with this wire. Okay, yeah. We're good. That can go around there. And then if I get the other red wire up, we can go around that black wire like this instead. And the red wire is going to go to our power switch. And then the other side of the power switch is going to go to our power distribution hub. So something like this seems very reasonable. This seems like it's going to fit. And in fact, what you can do is the end of this black wire is already stripped. I'm going to go ahead and pull that off. And if you lift up the lever above the black port here on the end. So really quickly, we'll go through the whole power distribution hub. We have battery input, so plus and minus. That's for red and black from our battery connector. Then next to it, we're not really going to use the RS-485. We have term on off. When you have a CAN network, when you have a control area network, CAN network, if it's on, that means we have a terminated resistor there. If it's off, it means we don't. And the way that the control area network works is you need a resistor, a 120 ohm resistor on both ends of the wires. So we want this to be on. We have two places to attach CAN wires here. This is the USB-C where we're going to connect to update it. We have some fuse ports here where we are going to put the fuses in later. And we can choose what amperage we want those fuses to be. One fuse will power the radio, and another fuse is going to power our RoboRio. And then all of these ports on the side that we can lift up and attach stuff to, any speed controller, motor, other device can be attached there. And we have different amperage breakers that we can put in depending on what we're controlling. OK, so now that we have this stripped, we're going to lift the black lever, the lever on the black end on battery connector. Also, it'll give a battery voltage here on the readout. And there's a hole then here that it can fit into. And what we need to do is we need to bring that wire into that hole. And if you get it lined up right, which I can't see because I'm on the wrong side of the robot, that should slide straight in. And all of the wire strands should go in as well when you slide it in. So you can slide that in and you'll feel it start to hit the insulation at the end. When that's in all the way, push down on that lever. And every single electrical connection we make, after we make it, we're going to pull on the pieces to see if they come apart. And I don't mean like gently a little bit. I mean like give it a yank and see if it moves. That does not move, so that's connected. All right, so now that wire is sort of dictating where we can put our PDH here. So if we look at the whole wire and where it's being pulled here, like if I try to pull this way over here and everything is super tight, that doesn't seem like a good spot for it. Same thing, if I go too far this way and it's really getting yanked, that doesn't make me happy. But it seems like anywhere around here is probably going to work for us. So that seems good. That seems like a really good spot for that. Then our power switch can go anywhere around here where that's going to connect and go in. So I'm liking this location for our power distribution hub. The last thing I want to check is if we have all of these speed controllers lined up here, can they all reach a port? And the answer is yes. They can all reach a different port. So it seems like we're going to mount our SparkMaxes right on the end of this board. We're going to mount our power distribution hub right about where it is. And in fact, I like where it is so much, I'm going to add a couple little marks around here. And I can use those marks to reline it up if it moves when we go to attach it. OK, and then at the very end, I don't really care where this ends up. So this looks like a pretty solid layout. So let's go ahead and start attaching pieces and making this stuff work. OK, so we'll save the speed controller side for later. Let's work on our power side here. So the next thing we want to attach is getting the red wire attached to our power switch. And unfortunately now, we can't just put it in and use a lever. It's going to get screwed on to this terminal. So what we need to find is we need to find a ring terminal for 6-gauge wire. And we did get a bag of those. That is these. And on them, they say blue dye, 374/7. There is probably a specific tool that is designed to crimp these. You probably don't have that tool. I probably also don't have that tool. I'm going to use just the biggest pair of crimps that I have. So this one I have for non-insulated or insulated, but basically I'm just going to put this in and I'm going to squeeze as hard as I can. You will need some kind of wire crimpers, so go ahead and buy a pair of those. If you really don't have one, you can try to crush this in a vise, and that might work for you. OK, so this is now going to have to get attached to the end of our red wire. The question is, do we want to cut our red wire down at all? And I don't think we do. I think we'll just adjust this position to work with the wire as it is. So if I pull that off and I slide this on very, very carefully, if you slide it on, it should go down, and we should be able to make it basically touch the insulation down there when it's on all the way. OK, then I'm going to take my crimper, and I am going to line it up kind of in that first section. There's sort of two sections. I don't know, because there's that line, that blue line running through everything. So there's like two different sections there. I'm going to crimp both sections because I really want a good solid crimp here. So I'm going to line this up on that top section. and I am gonna squeeze basically as hard as I can. Once I get it like enough that I feel like the wire is caught, I'm definitely gonna use my second hand on the crimpers too. And I'm just gonna squeeze it as hard as I can. All right, and then I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna move down, I'm gonna do it one more time in the other spot. And we just squeeze as hard as we can squeeze. Okay, tug test on this, does it move? It does not. That feels really solid and really secure. But we're gonna have exposed wire now. So the next thing we have to work with is the electrical tape. And included in the kit was both red and black electrical tape, so we might as well make the color match. So I'm gonna grab the red electrical tape here and find the end. Electrical tape, I find, is much nicer to cut with scissors, because when you try to tear it, it stretches and who knows what happens. And so I'll take just a section of electrical tape and then come back over to my wire here. And I'm gonna start mostly on the insulation, like 75% on the red insulation. And then I'm just gonna start wrapping it around until we get to the top. And you can wrap this first and then cut it second. Kind of had a good guess for how far I needed. But yeah, you could wrap it on and then cut it when you have it wrapped enough. And then this is gonna go on this post. We need whatever size that nut is. So let me look for a socket. My guess is that is going to be a 3/8 bolt. Maybe 7/16. 3/8? 7/16. All right. So let's get a 7/16 socket. And if you don't have a socket, this can be done with a regular wrench, but it's gonna take a lot of time because there's not a lot of room for you to get in there to work on it. So I'm gonna turn this just to get it going. I'll do both sides at once since we're here. Move the little rubber hat out of the way. Okay. And it doesn't matter which side you attach to. The switch will work if I attach the battery to this side or to this side. It's going to work just fine either way. And in fact, there is one small difference that we want to take into account when we're going to attach this. And that is the way this switch works is you push the red button and that turns it off. This red lever on the side, when you push that in, that turns it on. So if you want to have the on switch visible from the outside, then you can mount it this way. Let me take both of these nuts off. You can mount it this way. If you want the red power switch to be inside the robot and maybe a little bit more protected, you can do it this way. So then you'll be reaching in the robot and flipping the switch. Either way is pretty easy, so I think you're good no matter what you do. I will say one more thing, which is that this power switch, if this gets hit by another robot, by a game piece that's falling inside your robot, by anything, and it turns you off during a match, that's it. You are turned off for that match. So sometimes teams will actually build something that helps to protect this a little bit. So you have less room to reach in and hit that button. You could have kind of a wall next to it maybe. So it's really hard for something to fall on it if that wall is there, but you can still reach in very easily with your fingers. Or the other thing we can do with this is we can bring this, instead of putting this all the way outside on the edge of the robot like this, where it's definitely vulnerable, we're going to bring it in on the robot when we go ahead and mount it. So it's a little bit closer. That might make our wire running here a little bit more tricky, but that's okay. It's worth it. So it doesn't really matter this direction or this direction too much. Your choice, your preference on which side you want the switch to be. For some reason, I like it on the inside of the robot. And I'm going to go ahead and screw this in. Now, this crimp that we put on, you'll notice that like if we kind of look at the side of it, this side is nice and flat. It's lined up with the bottom of the wire. All of the other wire is sitting on this side. So if I try to connect it this way onto something, it's not going to sit as flat. Looks like on this, it just does barely make it around the corner, so we might be okay. But in general, you want to put the flat side facing down, and then the nut or whatever it is that's connecting on the top can squeeze down onto the side where it is, offset a little bit. So we're going to screw that in. I'll switch now to the ratchet. And you need to be a little careful when you're screwing this in. First of all, okay, so all power lines, like this is a power line, needs to be very, very tight. We need to make sure that this can't move. Like if you can rotate this at all, that's not tight enough. That said, I don't want to tell you to just go and make this literally as tight as you can, because those bolt stems that are on here, I've seen people turn it so tight that it rips the stem off, that threaded rod. So make it, tighten it as much as you feel like you can, and then see if this rotates at all, then give it an extra, go back in and give it an extra little bit until it kind of doesn't rotate. That feels, I can do one more maybe. Okay, that is not moving. So it's always kind of safer if you don't have a good feel for it yet, it's safer to kind of work your way in. Now, I can put that little rubber hat on. Unfortunately, depending on who your inspector is at the competition, that is still exposed positive voltage, right, from our battery. So there's a really good chance they're going to ask you to cover that up with electrical tape. So we might as well do that now while we're already in here and working on it. I don't know that there's a good way to do this. Maybe if we can go underneath everything maybe. Come back around. Maybe go around again. Try to get that area. Go around it maybe on this side. And something like that. Probably a neater job could be done. And then maybe the hat will still go on there. Not that it does anything at this point. Kind of. All right. So that is, completely covered up. There is no exposed metal anymore. Okay. Our next step then is going to be to build the wire that goes from the other stud here to the red port on our power distribution hub over here. So we can lift up that one. We know we're going to have a wire running in there, so we got to go from here to there. And we need to make that cable custom from scratch. So you should have a couple of sections of both red and black wire. This needs to be 6-gauge wire. So the main wires coming out of the battery are 6-gauge. You can always go bigger. So this is 6-gauge, but you could go to 4-gauge. Turns out when the number gets smaller, the wire gets bigger. But 6-gauge came in the kit, and that is going to be good enough for what we're doing. Now, if we kind of bring this in to where we thought was, about as far in as we could go, I kind of want to have it naturally sort of line up, so it's kind of a straight shot in there. So something like that, okay? Yeah, that looks like that's going to work. All right, so what I want to do is let's put a ring terminal on one side of this first. So unfortunately with this stuff, you can't cut. Well, I don't have a wire stripper for 4-gauge wire. So there are a few ways you can try to do it. You can go in with like some cutters and try to just cut a little bit and not cut into the wire. The way that I've had the most success is by using a utility knife or razor blade and just kind of cutting in until you feel the wire and then rotating it around. But before we do that, we do want to try to get that much wire stripped. So kind of right at my thumbnail is where we want to go. So if I start right there and get started, let me see. I didn't lose it yet. So it's right about there. Okay. Then I'm just going to kind of cut in and just rotate this around. And hopefully when I make it to the other side, my cuts line up. Okay, and if they don't, you might have to just keep cutting a little more. Once you kind of made it all the way around, you can start bending the wire and start to see where there is a gap or not. So I can see if I bend it this way, I still see insulation in there. So that means I'm going to go back with the razor blade and I'm going to go around one more time. Okay, and now let's see. If I bend it, now I see wire. So that's good. And wire on the other side, so we can pull it out. And the thing that we're kind of looking for as we detach this, oh, that's hard, is did I cut any of the wires? And it looks like I didn't, right? Like if a lot of the wires are cut, if you cut a couple, that's not a big deal. But if a lot of the wires are cut, then you're going to have to just cut this off and try again. All right, and we should be able to just slide it onto the housing here. And it looks like I got my distance pretty good because that is just about touching the insulation. If I push it in, it touches the insulation. And now we're going to do that crimper again on this one. So we're going to grab it and squeeze as hard as we can. Okay, and then the other one, or the other spot. I'm going to do a second crimp. All right, and that's good. Now, let's go back to, well, let's see. We know we're going to have to cover everything. I still want to put some electrical tape first, just to cover the stuff we just did. So this time, we can kind of start out here. Again, start mostly on the insulation that already exists. And then we can sort of spiral this out. And I think if you play hockey, you should be good at this. I guess other sports too. Baseball, tennis, you got to put grip tape on stuff. Skating grip tape's a little different though. All right, let's snip it. And that looks good. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and fasten this onto our power switch over here. So we'll spin this by hand as much as we can. And then switch to the socket. And once again, I'm going to tighten it until I get scared, and then we'll see if we can rotate this. No, that feels good. I think we're there for that. All right, so we're looking at, all right, power distribution hub is going to go about here. If it has to move a little bit, that's okay. This is going to come in a little bit more to about there and sit down, which means that wire needs to be about, right, like that long. We do have the option of trying to give it a little bit of a bend out and a little bit of a bend down. Sometimes having that extra wire helps for aligning things. So sometimes if you make it just a little bit too short or a little bit too long, it can be a problem. So I think I'll actually do that. I'm going to cut it like here first, and we'll see how that goes. This is also hard to cut, so you may have to try to cut half of it and then move over and cut the other half. All right, and then it's going to be about the same amount of wire strip as we did last time. We do have more of those connectors just because we know that was about perfect to go in for the black wire. So we want to try to stick consistent with that. So if we're trying to take off about that much again, right, that's going to be about where my thumb has it marked. And then I'm going to use the razor blade again, the utility knife again, to try to make the cut. Now this one's a little harder because we attached it, so spinning it all the way around is a little bit trickier. But I think we can still get there. All right, let's see if I start bending it away, can I see any wire anywhere? Nope. We're going to have to go in and do one more pass here. And then I'll come back from the other side. Just take your time with this, obviously. Sharp tool, be careful. Okay, that side is good. My other side still has a little bit connected, so I can just come in and cut that, and it should come off now. Eventually, there we go. All right, raise the red one if you haven't already. And let's see, do we want this to go above or below the black wire? I think I want it to go above. That seems to make sense for me. So let's feed this in carefully, carefully. Make sure there's no, you got to really make sure there's no wire strands sticking out here. If there are wire strands sticking out, that's a problem. Oh, I didn't put it in far enough. Let's do it again. That seems good. All right, close it. And again, the tug test looks good. Looks like I did cut one strand of wire here. One strand isn't going to hurt anything. All right, and then we talked about basically Let me see here. Having a little bit of a bend in this wire. So when we come in, there's a little bit of control for that. Looks like it's a little too stiff. So what I can actually do is loosen this too. And we could come in closer by having that wire also be, well, not much. All right. So let me see. Yeah, OK. So I think that's not going to work quite right the way we want it to. Let me tighten this one back up. OK. Good news is it's really easy to just take this out and say, OK, oops, that was a mistake. We are going to want to cut a little bit more. So I guess I'm going to cut it around here this time. And we're going to go just straight in because it looks like I didn't leave enough. Also, some wire is more flexible than other wire. So there is more flexible 6-gauge wire that gives you a little bit more room to do things. All right, and now let's see. If this is there and this goes in here by that much, then we're going to be about there. Which that, yeah, OK, I like that. I like that. So let's go ahead and do another cut. You can measure with the, you can measure again with this if you want, somewhere around there. OK, and let's just start cutting around as much as we can here. OK, I think we're started. Just need to connect the two cuts together, and I think we got it. So just wiggle and pull. If you can't get it to go off this way, you can try to grab, if you get a little bit off, you can try to grab that end with pliers to help out a little bit. So something like, even this one where I think the end's cut, you might be able to help hold on to it. There we go. All right, one more time, we are going to feed this into this spot. And I'm not going to attach it here. Actually, I'm going to feed it in and just see if I'm happy with all of the positioning that we've got. OK, so when that is in all the way, are we happy? Yes. Now, my issue is I'm going to have a harder time insulating this edge if I stop now or if I attach it now. So I'm going to take that back out for just a second. And let's go ahead and try to cover up this side too with insulation with some tape. OK, I think I want this to wrap the other way. Let's start over and wrap this way. And same thing, we'll just try to go around it as much as we can. Here and something like that. Looks all right. OK, I don't know if the hats are falling off. We're not going to worry about those. The electrical tape is getting it done. All right, now we're ready to attach this for real. So let's feed this in to the red port here on our power distribution hub. So one strand that doesn't want to go in. All right, hold on. We can kind of try to straighten it out a little bit. Also, this panel back here, if you're wiring and this panel is a problem, well, it's probably been long enough for you that the glue is set. I know I said don't take it off right away. Glue stayed, or the pieces stayed where they were supposed to stay. So you can kind of reach in maybe a little bit better now to get access to this stuff. And the same thing goes for the front panel, of course. All right, let's go. That's all the way in. Drop it down and pull on it. Make sure it's not going anywhere. It is not. OK. So these pieces are wired. We're now ready to go ahead and attach these to our board here. And we got a bunch of different options for how to attach them. We could try to add just a bunch of that same material that we used to connect our back panel here. We could use some more of that stuff to connect it down. This stuff feels like it grips pretty strong, and these things are relatively light, so they're not going to move much. That said, I do think for me, the power switch I like to bolt down, because it just feels like the bottom is not flat, it's not easy to attach stuff to, and it's also got all these big wires dragging it around and stuff like that. You're going to push the buttons a lot. So let's go ahead and bolt that down. And the way we're going to have to do that is with a drill. We're going to drill through. And again, if you have some more of those 1.5" bolts, we can keep using those. If you don't have any more of those, again, you'll have to make a trip to the store to pick up a few more bolts. But let's go ahead and get our drill here. And I'm just going to drill still the number 7 drill bit, always the number 7 drill bit, unless I guess it was a 1/4" drill bit at one point. Okay, and I'm just going to set this down about where we want it to go. And I'm just going to put the drill in the hole, the mounting hole, and drill through. All right, and then I'll drop one of those bolts in. And then we got to reach underneath and get the nut started. But we're like experts at blindly attaching nuts these days. If you want to put a washer underneath this before you put the nut on, also fine. We did that for a bunch of our other ones up here on the top. And then we just start tightening it. This is not the correct wrench. So, but I have a 3/8 socket, which is the right size. All right, let's go. That will work. Okay, trying to get the nut started. I think it's started now. So is it started? It is started. Oh, right. This is that was a 7/16 socket where I tried the 3/8 and then I switched to a 7/16. All right. Now I've got a 3/8 socket or wrench on the bottom. Now we can start tight. There we go. And probably, if I can find a good place to reach under here from, probably I should tip the robot up and this would get easier, but here we go. All right, that one is tight. And you can rotate a little bit just to try to make it flat, but it doesn't matter too much. Then I'm going to go ahead and line it up on the other hole and drill that one through. And I'm always checking, by the way, like, am I going to drill into a motor? Am I going to drill into anything? I know I have open space here, so this is safe to drill. We're going to get to some holes later that are less safe to drill, and we're going to have to be very careful with how we deal with them. Or we might. I don't know. Maybe not. Okay, another bolt goes in. Another nut that will start from the bottom. Get the ratchet on there. Couple of turns to get it started, and away we go. Yeah, I do think a handled Allen wrench is probably not a bad investment, especially 1/8 and 5/32, which are sort of the two main sizes that we use on this build. Of course, now you're almost done, so, but for next year. Okay, that's in. let's now attach our Rev 1 here. Looks like this also mounts with number 10 bolts. But man, if these are 1.5 inches, they're going to stick through a lot. Okay, for this one, I'm going to do a couple things slightly different. Okay, the first thing is this drill bit is bigger than the hole size. And the hole is very big on the power switch, so I can drill through and not hit anything. Also, I know there's a lot of material here. Also, I know that the power switch is relatively cheap. The power distribution hub is relatively expensive, so I don't really want to keep drilling directly into those holes. But what we can do is just sort of line this up to roughly where we're happy with it. And we can mark all the holes, and then we can go through and drill them. And let's see, will the Sharpie reach down far enough to mark the hole? It will, in fact, not. Okay, so we can do this with, probably a snap punch will work. Make sure, or try to put it in the center of the hole. There will be some ability for it to adjust. Okay, and make sure you don't let this move. Hold the power distribution panel in place while you go around and punch all of the corners. Okay, then we can just sort of flip this up out of the way. So when we go to drill, we're not drilling through our expensive piece here. Next problem. 1, 2, 3 holes are good. The 4th hole, if I drill through it, could potentially hit the motor. So if I want to drill this 4th hole, I need to put some kind of scrap material in between that's going to stop me from crashing into the motor. And ideally, it should be metal of some kind. That said, you can also probably get away with just having the 3 holes mounting this down. But let's go ahead and see what we have available to us to block that last spot. So trying to just use things that I know you have in the shop. Can we fit this under there? Nope, we don't have enough space to fit that under there. Okay, well, let's go ahead and do the first 3 holes, and then I'll see what I can find to protect it for the last hole. And the nice part about the wood electrical board is all of these wood chips and sawdust are not conductive, so we don't have to worry about them shorting any of our electrical components. All right, so there's 3 of them. Then to do the last one, let's see. All right, so let's find something that we can put underneath there to block it. If you have, I think like the easiest thing is if you have some thin piece of metal, like these, which you might end up getting for bumpers later, I think you can just barely slide that in. And so now when I go to drill, like I have this metal piece in between me and the motor, my drill bit and the motor. I do think there might be a way to use these cutoff pieces from the frame that we had before. Let me see if I can tip the robot here on its side, and we'll see what it looks like from the bottom. Hey, we should move all of the things that we haven't attached yet before tipping it. Okay, now let's tip it. Okay, I think we can keep it here. So then that hole that we're going to drill is going to be, oh man, 1, 2, 3. The last one's going to be somewhere over there. I think if you take this piece and you hold it in like this, unless you get super lucky and one of those holes is perfectly lined up, that is also going to protect your motor. So if you don't have anything else, do that. If you have something other than this where it's solid, go ahead and slide that under there and just give yourself something that'll make sure we're not damaging that motor. All right, let's tip it back up. I'm going to use the other piece, and I'll do it from the top since that piece slid in for me. All right. Okay, so I'll take this piece now. Again, put this out of the way. I'm going to slide this in between where I'm drilling the hole, and then we can go ahead and drill that last hole. Okay, and that's good because I definitely hit the plate there. But it protected the motor, which was the goal. Okay, we can go ahead and bolt this in now. And we need, you know what? I guess it's the same bolts. So it is, let's see here. They will fit. So we're good there. If any of your holes don't line up when you're going through and doing this step, like, nope, that one does line up. It's okay to just open it up and kind of drill the wood hole out a little bit bigger if you need to. If you do need to drill the wood hole out to a bigger size though, you will want to put a washer underneath. And we have more problems. So this one that I'm trying to put in back here, it's hitting the motor. So it's just not gonna work in this position. Now the problem is if we move too far this way when we go to attach this, our wires might not reach from our speed controllers coming from the other wood panels. So our speed controllers that we want to have here, that we need to get the wires going in, those won't reach much farther than the edge of this wood piece. So I am going to opt in this case to just do 3 bolts instead of 4. So I'm just going to go ahead and take that one out, and we're going to go ahead and get the other 3 bolted down. And to be honest, 2 bolts I would actually be comfortable with. On some of the robots that I do demo-wise, I would just Velcro this piece down and not even use bolts. So I'm definitely not worried about it. And you should not be either. Okay, let's get this tightened. Oh man, everything is just a little too... I guess my Allen wrench is just a little too short to go over everything. So we gotta, if you have that ratchet, make use of it, because this is really about an inch hole. So we got about ½ an inch of screw to go. And it's a 1032, which means there's 32 threads per inch, which means we have to do about 16 turns in order to get this tight. All right, one down. Let's reach over, and we got to get nuts started on the other 2. Makes the little gap in the middle, though. This one is very easy to reach. All right, that's good. And you can even see before we attach the last one, it's not going anywhere. 2 on diagonal corners, more than enough, but I started the last bolt, we drilled the hole. So let's do that one too. Get the nuts started underneath here, there we go. And we are tight. Okay. That piece is now mounted. What is next? Okay, next I think we can go ahead and start attaching all of our SparkMax speed controllers. And so we're going to lay those out on our other plate here. And we're going to basically, we'll wire them in and then we'll attach them. These also have those grooves, just like our radio had, for zip ties to run around. So we're going to end up drilling 2 holes and run a zip tie, 2 holes and run a zip tie on each of these pieces. Okay, first thing though, make sure all of the green and yellow wires are pointing towards our power distribution hub. That means we'll have the red and black wires on that side and the red, black, and white wires on the other side. And now these wires are all not stripped. So we're going to have to strip these wires to be able to put them in. But with this size wire, you should be able to find a wire stripper that will do the job. Okay, so I have these ones, which are sort of automatic wire strippers. They are super, super easy to use. There are also the kind, this is the kind you're maybe more likely to have, where you close down on the wire and then squeeze it. You should be able to squeeze it all the way and then pull it out. With these, you have to just find the right wire gauge on the side. This is a 12 gauge wire. So you need to find the 12. Now for me, my small pair only goes to 16 gauge. So I'm not going to be able to use it on these, but I can use my automatic ones. And so you go down to the 12, and we want to strip, about that much. Let's see, this is stranded, right? So we'll go here. You want to strip maybe 1/2 inch. Maybe a little bit more. And then what we're going to do is lift the first 2 gates here on our power distribution hub, slide that wire in, and then drop it down, and then tug on it. And if it doesn't come out, you're good. And then we'll do the same thing with the next wire. Yeah, 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 inch seems like a good place. Okay. And you don't really need to twist these up, but if you have strands going out and getting in the way, you should do it just so they all go in. That is tight, good. And now we can sort of find a spot for this. And we can sort of maybe, let's see, if that one's straight, if they're all right now, well, we need room to run the zip ties, right? So we need a small gap in between them. But maybe if we start with this one straight and we leave a small gap, then this one will definitely be able to attach somewhere. And if we leave a small gap, this one lines up. And if we leave a small gap, this one lines up. But then if we leave a small gap, does this one line up? Oh, that's pushing it. All right, so we need this one to be a little bit off to the side of that first spot. Then we can have everything shifted over a little bit, and the last one be a little bit off to the side the other way. So instead of the wires being straight over, I've got just a little bit of a curve. I probably have the black wire lined up with the red slot, maybe even just a touch past that. And all we need to do now is mark where we're going to want to drill these holes. You can do it with a snap punch, but again, in wood, your drill bit's not really going to move. And we do want this to be relatively close to the front edge just to make sure these wires can reach here. And I'm just going to line it up where I was happy and put dots on all 4 sides lined up with those little cutaways, those little grooves on the corners here. Okay, when that's done, again, we don't want to drill right next to our speed controller. So we're going to move that out of the way, and then we can go ahead and drill these holes when nothing is there. And the good thing about these holes is it is okay if they're not perfectly lined up. We are going to be able to run the zip tie on a little bit of an angle if we need to. Okay, and then these ones, I think this one clears, but I'm going to be very careful drilling it. It is right next to the transmission. So you might want to stick something in there before you drill that hole, just like we were doing to protect the motor on the other side. And this one too, I think just clears. And it did, and I'm going to be very careful when I drill that. So again, it might be safer if you stick something metal underneath here, so when you drill through, it crashes into that instead. All right, so now we can take our first SparkMax and put it in its position. And let's see if these zip ties are long enough to go all the way around. So we have these ones that were in the kit of parts. And we need to start on the top, go down through one hole, and then you're going to have to reach under and try to feed it back up through the other hole. Good news is this is the hardest one to do. So once we get this first one done, it's going to just get a little bit easier. Actually, I'm going to start on this side because I think it's easier for me to get to the hole that's not right against the frame. It's tough, though, because there is a churro bar right there on one side and a motor on the other. But we can do it. If you have to tip your robot to be able to see, that is also fine. All right, now the moment of truth. Does this reach, or do we need to use 2 zip ties to do it? Oh, it's going to just barely make it. It's like perfect. Okay. One thing I want you to not do, don't put the end in the middle, because we want to be able to use that hole a second time to attach the next one over. So these two can share that hole, and I can pass this through that hole a second time and do it. But if the head of the zip tie is over there, it'll be a little bit more difficult. All right, then we've got to do it one more time. So we're going to go down through the first hole, back up through the second hole, and then we will attach this one as well. Okay, so that is on there. That's pretty secure. And even if it wiggles around, the wires are not in danger. Okay, happy with that? Now let's take the second one. I always want to make sure the wires fit. So as we go through, we're going to strip them and attach them as we work our way through here. So we'll strip both at once to save a little bit of time. And this is going to be like right here, right? So you know what? I think we can package these much closer than I thought. So we probably could have gotten closer on the first one. I'm just going to go right straight ahead into the next set here. And like I said, all of these ports on the PDH are the same. They all work the same. So it doesn't matter which ones you end up in, as long as we put fuses in the appropriate ones when all is said and done. All right, let's look to mark our next 2 drill holes. This is going to be somewhere around here. So we want to be able to drill holes. Oh, that's actually, okay, that's a little tight. We want to be forward a little bit more. We're going to drill our next hole right here and here. Okay, move that one out of the way. And let's drill. So this one is easy and for sure safe. This one is the one that's close to the motor. So again, I'm going to be careful. And it did just clear again. And once again, I do probably recommend sticking a piece of metal under there. Luckily, that might be the last one that we're drilling right next to the motor. All right, let's get our zip ties going through. Down, and then, yeah, this is right next to the motor again, so we'll have to, there we go, we got it. And I'm actually going to set up both zip ties first this time. It's a little easier to see when the speed controller is not in the way. Cool. Let's put our speed controller in. And then we can tighten these down. All right, next one, repeat the process. Let's go ahead and strip the 2 wires here. If I put this close to where it's going to go, I guess I might as well go straight across, right? Or mostly straight across. I guess this one feels a little bit closer, so I'm going to use these 2. So this time I am skipping one and then putting the wires in. Make sure you're tug testing all of these. I can't remember if I did it with the previous ones or not, so I'm going to go back through and pull on all of them, and they're all not coming out, so I'm happy with that. Let's mark where our next drill is going to go. Right there and right there. Move that out of the way. And so I think that's off the back of the motor. I think we're clear now on this one. Oh, but you can hit the churro if you drill too far. So keep an eye out for that. This one, nothing's in the way. 2 more zip ties. Let's prep them up. And also, just crossed my mind, if you are using bigger zip ties, if you're not just using the ones that came in the kit of parts, if you have to drill a bigger hole, 1/4-inch hole or whatever, feel free. That's totally fine. Even especially where you're trying to get 2 zip ties to go in together. All right, that one's good. Next one, get over here. Strip the wires. Let's see, so you're gonna go about there. These wires look like they line up with either that one or that one. That one looks perfectly straight, so I'm gonna end up using, what is this? This is port 3 now, so I've used 9, 8, 6, and 3. But yes, any number is fine. Whatever number you end up putting it into is fine. Tug test. Next wire goes in. Tug test, looks good. Let's mark our hole. Right about there, right about there. And we drill again. Two more zip ties. And we'll drop in our speed controller, our SparkMax here. All right, bring the last one over. Strip the 2 ends. The red and black side only, not the white side. Or the red, black, and white side. And if we line this up where it's going to go, I like the very last port. Looks like we're straight on port 0. Tug on it, it's good. Tug on it, it's good. Let's mark our drill holes. There we go. And now we drill them. Also, you can sand these holes or file them as we're going through. Make them nice. It's probably worth it. Go, drop the speed controller in and tighten our last 2 zip ties down. Well, last 2 zip ties for this section. Perfect. Okay. It's looking good. Let's take a look at where we want to put our last piece. That is the RoboRio, which is going to go somewhere over there. Again, let's think about what has to go where. Couple things. The lights on here, power status, radio comm, mode, and RSL. Well, RSL is just going to be what the robot signal light is doing. We want those to be visible, but it doesn't really matter what I do. They're going to be visible. I probably don't want this right out on the edge of the robot. I probably do like the idea of bringing it in a little more. And let's think about this. So power is going to go across the robot to one of these fuse ports. So like running that out here and going over seems to make sense. The Ethernet is also going to go over and then plug into our radio up above. And the only other thing that we need to plug in on here is the CAN ports. And this CAN port is going to come and connect to one of these yellow and green wires that are here. Now, turns out it's not quite long enough. If I rotate this, then I could just cut this wire directly and plug it in. That'll make this a little bit longer, the Ethernet cable. So I guess it's either this way or this way. And for some reason, I like the idea of having the writing lined up with the robot. But either one of these will work. I think we gain a little on the CAN, we lose a little bit on the other one. And if you know you're adding more stuff, more SparkMaxes or more something else to your robot, there is room over here on this plate to add one, or on the side here maybe. Next to our power switch, there's some room. There would be room on the outside here. You will have to run extended wires if you do that. But even if we try to put it right here, we used the last port already. So I feel like let's go in towards the middle of our robot and mount this somewhere around here. Now to mount this, there are a few different ways you can do it. On the bottom, there are these slots that you can use to zip tie it on. So like this will run through that slot. I think actually you can also zip tie it around the side if you have something around the side to zip tie it to. But so going this way, we could drill a hole or two holes and come back around and attach it. If we put it on the side here, we actually could probably drill one hole and use the side of the robot to attach it. So if you want to use zip ties, that might be the way to go. That said, I have pretty much always mounted my RoboRios with Velcro or some kind of hook and loop fastener because it's so light, it really doesn't want to move much. And also, we've seen how sturdy our panels are that we have attached with that dual connection stuff. I mean, like, if that's not making it move, the inertia from the RoboRio isn't going to make it move. So I'm just going to use that to connect this in place. But I will use a lot of it. All right. So I'm definitely going to do a strip the entire length of the RoboRio here, or close to the entire length. And then I'm going to do another strip close to the entire length. And honestly, that's probably enough. But if you're really paranoid, we can do one more in the middle. I'm also going to do one more in the middle just because this is really thick stuff. And so having support in the middle seems nice as well. We're going to use the same technique we used before. So we're going to peel off one side and stick that onto kind of towards the outside of the RoboRio here. And then get another one. And do that on this side. And the last one we'll put right in the middle. All right, then we can peel all of these off. Maybe. You can try anyway. All right, there we go. Flipping this over, lining it up. I want to be sort of close to my SparkMaxes. Make sure to wipe this surface off at least so it's clean, so the adhesive has a good chance of sticking. And I'm happy with that. I'm going to shift it a little bit so that there's more space on the top. So these wires, I have a little bit of room to try to route them on something. So I'm going to line it up close to the other side here. And then we squeeze it down. And I mean, you can just tell, like, it's not going anywhere. I'm going to have to fight to unhook it if I need to unhook it later. All right, cool. This is mounted. I think that's all of our main components mounted. So let's go ahead and finish. Let's finish wiring up our motors. Then we will power the radio and the RoboRio, and then we'll come back and we'll do our CAN wires at the very end. All right, so this wire, I guess we'll do this motor first, because this is going to come down to our very first SparkMax on the line here. You could just go directly like this. That's bad, just in the sense that wires hanging out in air are things to get hooked on. And if it gets hooked and it rips out, you don't have that functionality anymore. So I really like the idea of running it along the frame to make that stuff work out. And if I'm going to run it along the frame, we do want to make sure that we can reach and everybody will connect together. And I think it just does. There is, I think, some in this Molex box here. So we've got the blue Molex box, and if I open that up and dig to the very bottom of it, there is a little baggie with some zip tie anchors. So let's take that out. And also, you might want your baggie that has the very tiny zip ties for this one. We'll see how it goes. So let's see. The first thing is we just want to get over to this panel and then start working our way down. Now, what I can actually see is if I run a zip tie between where my Velcro was and the T bracket, that will let me come around and hold onto these wires. And I can route them on the inside like this, or I can route them right on this outside face. I think I'm going to do this outside face so they can come straight down and then connect. So let's go ahead and zip tie that one on. And then you know what? On the way down, I think we can do another one. So as we're going through and I'm doing wires like this, it might seem a little overkill. But the idea is wiring is one of the easiest ways for your robot to stop working during a match or to have issues. And the cleaner and neater you do your wiring, the more you sort of like take care and make it easy to trace where the wires are going, the less potential issues you're going to have. Now, when we're doing this up here at the motor, on the back of the motor, we want to check these wires and we want to make sure that they are not pulled tight. So like if this is pulled tight around the corner, that's bad. So make sure you have some slack here. Make sure you have a little bit of excess there. Tight joints for wires is always not something we want to deal with. Okay, then we're down here at the bottom and we need to connect these two together. And I think what we want to do is let's just connect them together. It looks like it's going to be close enough that we're not going to gain anything by cutting either of these wires. So first thing I'm going to do is, remember the white wire doesn't do anything. And the white wires, probably we can tuck them in between our speed controllers like this. And that will keep them sort of out of the way and not dangling. We could have added these maybe to the zip ties when we were putting them on. I guess this gap here needs to do double. All right, that's pretty good. So those are out of the way. So now the red and black wires on this side, I'm going to strip those. And it's all about the same amount as we did before. And also in the kit of parts, there were some lever nuts. And they look like this. So these are from a company called Wago. There are alternative lever nuts as well. I really like the Wago ones. But some of the first suppliers sell other versions. And the idea is if you lift the orange tab, you can put a wire in and then drop the orange tab. So basically the exact same thing we were doing on the power distribution panel or power distribution hub. So if we take the red wire here and slide that in, make sure you get all the little strands in there. That's the one thing you got to watch out for. And if you look at the bottom, it's clear. So you can see when it's in far enough. Then you can lower it. And of course, we're going to pull on it to make sure it doesn't move. Get a second one. And we're going to use that for the black wire as well. Now, there are other types of connectors here. A lot of teams will use Anderson connectors. There are like XT connectors that are kind of common. Some teams were using those. You can use spade connectors that plug into each other. All of those types of connectors are generally okay. These, though, they're toolless. I don't have to do any crimping. I don't have to do any soldering. They go on very easily. You saw how quick it is. And you can take wires apart very quickly. So these are actually my favorite connectors on robots right now. All right, then we're going to connect the red wire to the red wire. Although in this case, it doesn't actually matter. If we connected the red wire to the black wire, since this is the output side of our speed controller, all that's going to do is flip the polarity of the voltage that we're sending, which means instead of sending positive 12 volts, we would send negative 12 volts, which is not a big deal. That just means the motor is going to spin in the other direction. So if you, in programming, have a motor that's spinning the wrong direction and you don't want to fix it in the program, you can come in and flip the wires as well. But it's best to start with the colors matching. So we're going to do red to red, black to black. And now we know these wires need to get somewhere over here. They need to get a little bit of strain relief. We need to have them attached somewhere over here so that it's not out and just bouncing around. And let me see. There's actually a hole right here that goes through to the middle of the robot as well. So I think I could pass this through both of these holes and go around the two connectors right here. And let me just see if that's hitting it is not hitting the belt. So we should be able to do this. And I'm going to try to get this in the middle of the two connectors so that in theory we could still open them. Looks like, okay, we could open the red one. The black one looks like, nah, not going to happen. That's okay. Worst case scenario, if we have to go in there and mess with those wires and we can't get to them, we can cut the zip tie and then be on our way. And actually, you know what? Okay, yeah. It definitely wants to be over a little bit more. I was pulling these wires a little bit too tight around the corner here. So we kind of want to be on the edge of that. But that's going to be okay. All right, first one is hooked up. Next, we have the two motors on this side of the drivetrain. This is our left side. So we've got these two motors down here, and we've got both of their wires. And we could take the wires up this way, or we could take the wires underneath everything and connect. And I'm not sure which I prefer. I think, let's see, if we try to route these up this way, going underneath scares me a little because if we don't get them zip tied up nicely, they are something hanging on the bottom of the robot that could eventually lead to trouble. So usually I don't really like this either, bridging the middle of the robot where there's nothing kind of supporting those. But that, I think, is the only real easy way that we can not have to extend those wires. So we're going to make it work. So if we bring these wires forward, or this way, underneath everything, then we can go around like this and then connect everything over there. So that seems pretty good to me. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to take a small zip tie. And I'm just going to take all four of these wires and I'm going to bundle them up together. And what that's going to do is give us, it's not going to be super good strain relief, but it means that all four of the wires now are sort of supporting each other. And that helps some. So we'll have a little bit of a pack here going around. And then we're going to kind of get to this point here on the side of the wood where I'm going to want to be able to connect these to something. And let's go ahead and try one of these zip tie anchors or tie wrap anchors. So these they're adhesive. You peel them off. You kind of want to wipe the area down a little bit. And then we're going to stick it down. And I'm sort of right on the corner of the wood here. Tip it up for a sec so you can see maybe through the plastic. So we're right on the corner of the wood here. And now these pieces are going to go on top of that zip tie anchor. And you want to be a little careful with these zip tie anchors. Just like before, they need a little bit of time for the glue to set. So I don't want to put a ton of strain on them. But I can pass a zip tie through the anchor. And let me show you on one out here how it's going to look. there are these slots on the side. So we have these slots on the edges of the zip tie anchor, and essentially you can pass the zip tie through those slots, and then you can come back up and around in order to connect it. So the wires then can be inside, and this holds it down without us having to drill more holes. So that's all I'm doing here. I'm going to slide this zip tie through, pull it up on top of the wires, and then I'm keeping my wires organized too. So I want to keep the two, I sort of made a square out of the 4 wires, and the 2 on the top of my square are one motor, and the 2 on the bottom of the square are a second motor. And you definitely want to keep it like that. Because one of the only things that you can do here, like it doesn't matter if I connect these 2 to this SparkMax or this SparkMax, but if I mix up the wires and I connect one red and one black, like this to the SparkMax, then we're going to have a problem. So go back through, trace your wires, make sure you've got 2 matching ones. And maybe on the other side, we will actually connect them first, or add connectors to 2 of them first. That probably makes sense. Let's go ahead and add our connectors. So get a Wago, put it on the red one, and tug on it. And get another one and put it on the black wire. And also tug on that. OK. So those are connected. That's one motor. Kind of fixing the wires on this other one that got a little crimped because I saw it. Now, our next speed controller here is going to come out and connect to these. And you can take your time. I would even suggest taking your time and making these as nice as possible. But there's sort of a competing thing, which is I definitely don't want to cut the wires on the speed controller. And I don't know if I want to cut the wires on the motor either, because if I end up reusing these motors, I might not want shorter wires next time that I use them. But if you do get new motors every year, so I don't know, it's probably fine. But if you wanted to, you could cut these wires down to size here, and then restrip them, and then that should put us in a good position to connect to our next speed controller. But I'm going to do it without cutting any of the motor or speed controller wires right now, if I can help it. So let's strip our next speed controller, and then line up the black wires here. Tug on it, and then the red wires. Shove those in there, tug on it, looks good. Okay, then we have our second set of motors here. And we'll have to see how we want to kind of route these to keep them as neat as they can go. All right, our second set here, let's strip those. Get 2 more Wagos. Tug, of course. Pull on that one. All right, red wire. I guess I'm going to have these go. I'll have these go on top. Sorry, red wire to red wire. Tug on those. We've got the black wire and the black wire. Put that in, tug on those. OK. So this side of our drivetrain is done. We do want to neaten these wires up a little bit. So what can we do? How can we do that? We can definitely pull some of the wire back through underneath. And then I do kind of want this bundle here, where these 4 speed controllers are coming out. I kind of want to get a zip tie there to hold it down, and I kind of want to get one more zip tie on the other side. So let's do that. Let's get an anchor. Let's get an anchor over here, where we can kind of pull these out and attach them. Somewhere around there. And again, I'm doing a decent but relatively quick job of wiring. If you have some extra time, the neater you make your wires, the cleaner you have the runs, the better your life is going to be. So I'm going to leave a little bit of slack up coming towards the SparkMaxes and tighten those down. And then, like I said, we want one more Let's kind of shove those through a little bit. We want one more somewhere over here. It's probably to support the other side of our connectors. Okay, so we got plenty of zip tie anchors for right now. Let's get another one. We'll sort of wipe the area off. This one on a little bit of an angle maybe, something like that. And we'll go through. Zip tie that one in. All right, that is passable. Definitely not the best, definitely not the worst job I've ever done. Okay, next up, we've got our other motors, drive motors here. And they're going to have to go probably through here and then connect to everything there. But we have a lot of extra slack there. So I think we're probably going to want to get rid of some of that. So the other way that you can go about doing this is we can, especially when you have a lot of extra slack like this, it's probably not a bad idea if you want to cut these wires and get rid of that extra slack. But I'm going to go ahead and start attaching Wagos. So one of them onto the black wire here. Cool. One of them onto the red wire. Not coming off. Not coming off. Let's go ahead and strip the other wires. Actually, while we're here with the wire strippers, let's just do all of these. So we'll do the 2 on this speed controller and then the 2 on our last speed controller at the same time. Okay. Then we'll take these 2 wires here. They're a little closer, so I'll take them to the farther speed controller. So we'll go, let me see, I don't want them twisted. Doesn't really matter. We'll go black wire to black. Line those up. And we'll tug on that, then do red to red. Looks good. And then 2 more Wagos. Let's do the other set. So black wire goes in. Red wire goes in this one from our motor. And then we'll come up to our speed controller here. And red to red. Not coming apart, good. And the black ones go together. Cool. Now, let's start at the speed controllers here. And let's do another little anchor for these coming out. So we'll make sure we don't have any sawdust or anything there. And I'll put one kind of in between them right about here. And then let's put these wires in there. Because I think we want it ultimately to be about like that. That looks good to me. Okay, let's anchor them down. Cool. And then we want one more anchor somewhere right here on the end of the wood piece. So let's go ahead and do that. If I cheat out a little bit away from my speed controller there, it'll be easier to get the zip tie through. One thing you can do is if you sort of bend the end of your zip tie up, so I'm bending it up into sort of like a curved shape like that, then when I slide it through here and it hits the speed controller, it wants to bend up. So to go up and through a lot easier. All right, and we'll just get this started on all these wires, and then we'll try to align the wires a tiny bit before we tighten it down. So this seems good. Form them into a little square. All right, now we have all of this extra wire that we want to sort of get bundled up back by our motors. Something like this. And what would be great is if we could zip tie around that motor and make it work. So let me go ahead and try that. I don't know if you think this zip tie is going to be long enough to do that. It is not. So we're going to have to use 2 or a longer zip tie. So if I do one like this, I can sort of wedge that under the plate. And we can take all of these wires. I want to be on top of all of them. And then I got to pass this down into the zip tie end that's hidden on the bottom. So I'll get that started. Cool. Then we can sort of line those wires up on the motor, make sure they're slack where they're plugging into the backs of the motors. And then let's just tighten this one down all the way. Cool. And then that is pretty secured all the way. There's not much loose stuff there that it can get caught on. Perfect. Next up, let's finish our power lines. OK, to do this, we're going to wire from first of all, we got to go from the RoboRio to our PDH, and we have to go from our radio up here down to the PDH. And to do that, we've got some, this is much, much smaller gauge wire that we're going to be using. This is, it's probably written on it. My guess is that it is 18 gauge wire. But, man, there's a lot of numbers I don't see. Oh, there it is, 18, yes. This is 18 gauge wire, and this was in the kit of parts. So you should have this sort of similar bundle looking thing. And we're going to use this to connect from our RoboRio over to power, and then also from our radio up here. And to do this, we're going to want a little tiny screwdriver. So if you have a little screwdriver, go ahead and grab that now. OK. And we are looking for a a little tiny flathead screwdriver. And this plug that's in the RoboRio over here, we're going to want to go in, and those are flathead screws facing down, and we just want to unscrew that. And I can go ahead and put this back in my handle too. That'll make my life easier. There we go. So we can unscrew that side and this side. OK, then this should unplug. If it doesn't unplug, one of the sides is probably not unscrewed. Oh man, I did such a good job of finding the flathead side the first time, but now I can't do it. There we go. All right, we got it. So this is going to come out. And after we unplug it, well, I guess before we unplug it, but we can see that there is a V and a C on the top of this connector. So V is going to be for our voltage in, our positive voltage, or red. And C is our common, or ground. So we're going to end up putting a red wire in V and a black wire in C down here. Now, to control those ports, we basically stick the wires in, but to tighten down on the wire, there's screws on the other side. This is why we had to unscrew it to get access to those screws easily. And so if I start screwing or unscrewing on those screws, see if we can hold it at the right angle, you can see as I screw this one in, that jaw on the top is slowly closing and crimping down on whatever wire we put in there. Now as I unscrew it, there's just like that faint silver line that's opening and closing. So we stick the wire in, we screw it down, and that's how we connect to this. So if you get that 18 gauge wire, let's undo it. So we got a nice end here. So I'm trying to unwrap those wires. And get yourself your wire strippers. This should be 18 gauge, so pick the appropriate size for your wire stripper. And this one should be a little shorter than the last ones that we were stripping. And I'll show you how to check if it's too long or not. You'll know as soon as we go to put it into our connector. Okay, so we have those little ends off. I did about that much for whatever that's worth. I would say this is closer to 3/8 of an inch. So this is then going to go in. We're going to do the red one into the V. And if you push it all the way in, like I'm hitting the bottom of the connector here, what you shouldn't see is any wire showing. So you see how you only see the red connector? If instead it looked like this, that means you stripped too much and you need to trim it down until it goes all the way inside and just the insulation is sticking out. And then same thing for the black wire. So it looks like mine are slightly long maybe, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and trim them just a tiny bit. This is a good job for a pair of flush cutters. Let's grab those. And this is going to be metal pieces. So I'm going to not do this on top of the robot. I'm going to move, I'll reach way out here so these can fall on the floor. And I'm just going to trim a tiny bit because mine were very close. All right, and so now I guess that's my new wire length here. I would say that's close to 1/4 of an inch now. All right, let's go back. And once again, I'm going to put this into the red wire into the V spot. And then I'm going to hold it there. Try to keep it all the way in. And then you can go ahead and tighten this screw down on that wire. And when you're done tightening the screw, once again, we're going to tug on that to make sure it doesn't come out. Then you can put the black wire into the C. Same thing. I'm going to try to hold it in so it doesn't move on me. And then we're going to go ahead and screw that one in. And good. And tug on that wire too. Make sure it does not come out. Okay. Let's line this up. We can plug it back in. The wires are going to be sticking towards the USB ports when you plug it in. And then the V and C should be away from the USB ports towards the outside of the robot. And then we got to screw these in to lock it in place so it can't unplug on us. And once again, you can just pull on that. If it doesn't move, you're good. OK, now this wire, we can work our way all the way around. Maybe we go in this way. But we need to get to the other side of the robot. Usually I think I'm going to go this way. I don't really like going through empty space with wires because there's nothing to sort of support them. So I think the routing is going to be something like this. Maybe to here, then maybe we go this way, then we go this way, then we go this way, and then we can plug in. And I think I could cut that now, and that would be OK if I were close. But I think it's easier or better if we just sort of route the wires as we go. So especially with these where we have an infinite amount of wire, well, we've got, I don't know, what is that, like 10 feet of wire? And we can always cut it later. So I'm going to start with a zip tie, another one of these zip tie sticky guys over here. And we'll start out with that as our initial anchor point. So I'm going to get it started, and then we can try to make it organized. And make sure you leave like a little loop here so that you can unplug this and plug it back in. Because if you need to take your RoboRio out, but this is so tight that you can't unplug those wires or unplug that connector, then that's a problem too. So we're going to just leave ourselves a little bit of a loop, service loop. Okay, and now we're looking to cross over to the other side. And you know, we're going to end up running other wires this way as well. So let's go ahead and add one right on the top of our transmission here. And then another one right on the other side on the wood panel. And I might be overdoing it a little bit, but I don't know. You're seeing this in the future, so it's too late to stop me. And we'll just go ahead and zip tie these down as we go. And it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to try to keep the orientation sort of the same as we go through here. Remember, this one is where we want to turn it. So I'm going to have that zip tie running through the other direction. Like how I keep stacking zip ties on top of the RoboRio, but going back to the bag for more. I'm going to remember next time that they're there. All right. So we're going to use this to make a turn. We'll go the other direction on that anchor. Okay. And then we want one more here where we turn, and then one more over there. And these tie wrap anchors, these zip tie anchors, are available from Home Depot. All the hardware stores carry these somewhere in the electrical section. So if you do end up using a lot and you run out, you can get more. It is okay. Also, if you don't like using these and you want to drill holes into the wood and zip tie directly to the wood, also totally fine. Okay, this wire, eventually I'm going to want to pass it under there. So let's go ahead and zip tie this one on. And again, we're going to be changing our direction here. So go through. A little zip tie on this. Okay, and now I'm going to cut it. I'm going to cut it long. Definitely somewhere around here is going to leave me plenty of extra. Because I can't fit that whole bundle underneath the power wires, and I definitely want to run this underneath the power wires. So we're going to go under here. Like that. Cool. And then I think I just want one more anchor here. We're going to come around this way. Okay, and then we're going to leave ourselves enough to once again have a little loop, a little service loop here. So something like that looks really good to me. Oh, wait, we don't want to go to 23. We're not going to go to the switchable spot. Yeah, let's go to 22. So somewhere around there seems good. That's where I'm going to trim my wires. Then we'll strip both of them. So I'm back up to like 3/8 of an inch instead of the 1/4 that we needed for our other connector here. And these ones, there's a couple different ways this can work. So theoretically, first of all, skip the first red and black. Let me actually, since this zip tie is in the way, I'll snip it early. All right. So we're going to skip the first red and black spots here because that is the switchable red and black spots. We're going to go to 22, which means it's the second red one or the third total one in from the end. And if you push on this at the right angle, it should actually just go in. And so if you push on that and it goes in and you tug on it and it doesn't come out, you're good. Now, occasionally, I'll show you the other way that we sometimes have to do this. Occasionally, your wires just won't go in nicely and they're going to fight you. And so in that case, if you push down on the button on the top, that opens the hole up, so then it should be nice and easy to slide the wires in, but you still have to tug on them to make sure they're not coming out. Okay, and then incidentally, that is how you would remove the wires. If you need to take the wire out, you push down on the button all the way until it's loose, and then you should be able to just pull it right back out. Okay, but we don't want it out, we want it in. One more tug test, it is still good. All right, I'm happy with that. So that is power to the RoboRio. The last thing we need power from is our radio up here. So same wires that we've been using, those 18 gauge wires, and we're going to go ahead and strip one end of them. And then it's going to be a little tricky because we are connecting this onto the bottom of the radio. So we'll see what we can see over there. So let me come around here to the front. So on the bottom of the radio, we have 2 holes. You see, I probably should tip the robot back a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. Let's see if I can also reach it myself. That seems good. All right, so on the bottom of the radio, right here, we have our 12-volt port, plus and minus. So what we're going to need to do is take our red and black wires, of course, one at a time. I'm going to put the red wire into the 12-volt plus side. And this works the same way as the last connectors we did. If you have it lined up, you should be able to just push that wire in. And then if you pull on it, it should be locked in. If you need to push on the button again with a screwdriver, you can do that. And then we're going to do the black wire into the minus side. Oh, one of my wires was not in. Got to make sure all the wires get inside the opening. Push that in, pull on it. Good. All right. Now I can tip the robot back down. Okay, and so these are going to come all the way down the frame, all the way into the inside here, and plug in right next to the wires we just did. So we're just going to add a bunch of zip ties as we go through this. I think I'm going to get one really close just to add some strain relief here. And I think if I go through the corner or around the corner of this, I should be able to zip tie that and hold it nice and tight on the inside edge of this rail. So leaving myself, again, just a little bit of slack here. Can pull that in nice and tight. And then we'll just keep doing the same thing, working our way down. Add as many as you feel like you need. I'm going to skip a few holes every time. Definitely every hole would be overkill. I like to get the zip tie started, just like before, and then I can get the wires lined up and laid flat. All right, and then the last one, let's go all the way down, basically to the end. That started, get those wires laid flat, and then we can pull it tight. All right, then I'm going to just have these run on the inside or right on the edge here, working our way around to the other plate. So I think just like before, I think we can get that zip tie diagonally through, and we don't even have a belt on this side. So the fact that it worked on the other place we did it means it should work fine here as well. You can use an anchor too if there's if you don't like this hole. Or if you have something else that's attaching here that's making it so it doesn't work for you. Pull that tight. All right. Then let's see, we're going to want an anchor up here, and then we can go all the way probably to the same anchor that we used on the other one. So let's get one more zip tie anchor here. And let's put it right on the corner here of the piece. And we're going to want to go this way, so we'll zip tie around that direction. Okay. Line that up. Pull it nice and tight. Cool. Then these, I'm going to want to go underneath the other stuff we have. So it might be time to cut this. And we will have a little bit of waste, but that's okay. So we're going to go to there, and then have a loop, and then go in. So somewhere around here is definitely going to give us enough wire. Now I can feed those under the power wires. And we can get over to this one, where we already have stuff. And usually, well, sometimes, let me take usually and make it sometimes you can get a second zip tie in there. I can't. on this one, but I have plenty of extra zip ties, so I'm actually going to snip this zip tie and then do a new one for all 4 of these wires together. So we can kind of bundle them up and then pull that zip tie down. And I don't know if I can get another click out of it. Nope. Well, let's see. It seems good. I pulled too hard on the zip tie and the anchor came up, but looks like the adhesive is still working, so I'm going to go with it. If it comes loose later, I'll replace it with a brand new zip tie anchor. Okay, then these are going to go on a little loop and then plug in. So I would say I was very close, but maybe I'm going to take off about that much wire. All right, let's go ahead and strip these so we can put them in. Okay, let's do the red one first. That went in, pulled on it, didn't come out. Then we can do the black one right next to it. Yeah, this one, give it one more try here. There we go. Looks good. Okay, so all of those are in and not coming out. And that is all of our power lines. Very nice. Let's see, what do we want to do next? Let's do the CAN lines now. And so the CAN lines are the green and yellow ones. And here's what we essentially have to do. We have to have the CAN start at CAN on our RoboRio. And we're going to have to go through all our devices and end on our power distribution hub. So the idea is we're going to have one giant chain of devices. So again, starting on the RoboRio, then we're going to go to the first SparkMax here. Somehow we're going to have to connect that in. Then we'll go SparkMax to the next SparkMax, to the next SparkMax, to the next SparkMax, to the next SparkMax, to the next SparkMax. And that last SparkMax then is going to have to get over to the power distribution hub. So some of these steps are very, very easy. If you still have these clips from before, those were in the box, and I said, you know what, we're going to need those. Well, now is the time. So I'm going to start on the first SparkMax next to the RoboRio, and just pick one of the two. One set has pins, one set does not. The pins don't reach anyway, so you're not going to be able to put that in there. It almost reaches, but they don't line up and they don't work anyway. So no matter what, we're going to have another wire connected to this to make that work. So you can use the pin side or the not pin side, doesn't matter. I'll leave the empty side going that way. And I'll take the pin side on that one. And now I have 2 more wires coming out of the next SparkMax here. And what we want to do is take the whole side from the next one, line it up with the pins on the first one, and plug it in. It is super, super, super important that you look at this when you're done and the yellow wires follow through and the green wires follow through. So if you connect this so that it looks like both fronts are facing each other, like where you can see the extra bit of wire of pin stuff here and the flats are together, that's actually going to be wrong. The green now is going to yellow, and this yellow is going to green. And that is the most likely cause. If we go in to try to find devices on your robot and you can't find them, that's the most likely reason why. Now, after you plug those two together, this little clip is going to go on the side of them, and you're going to basically push them into it, and it should snap in when you have it all the way in. Or you should feel it kind of nestle in there. And now they won't unplug. This is basically like locking them together. If you don't have these, you definitely need to put tape on those instead, just to keep them from loosening up, okay? Then the other wire coming out of our second SparkMax, and we have the 2 wires from our third SparkMax. We're going to get the 2 that the one that matches the wire from our second SparkMax And once again, we're going to do the same thing. Green to green, yellow to yellow. And then get one of those clippy pieces and drop it on there. Cool. And that one clicked nicely when I put it in. All right, so that's 2 connections made. Then we have the wire left over from our third SparkMax here. We have 2 wires from the fourth. Find the one that matches the one from the third. And again, green to green, yellow to yellow. And get another clippy thing and attach that in. Okay, and then the leftover wire from our fourth SparkMax. We have the 2 from the fifth. Find the ones that match. And I think it's always the pin that's left over and always the not pin side from the next one. But if you're doing it in a different order, that's fine. But it should always be the same one every time. Otherwise, you probably got your lines mixed up. Okay, snap that in. All right, perfect. Now, that was the easy part. We can take all of these and we can bundle them up and attach them just to be out of the way. You could, of course, cut these wires very short and just solder them directly to the other wire there, or get another set of Wagos to connect them. But just because this is sort of the least destructive way to make this happen, we're going to go and leave a lot of all of this, or leave a lot of these wires extra. And I don't know, I think I'm going to just sort of bundle them up. Something like that, maybe. And then look to attach them. I'll do 2 bundles of 2, I think. And I'm pretty sure I should be able to run a zip tie through the other zip tie. And we can just sort of piggyback on that zip tie that is mounting everything in. And then we can get that bundle here. Relatively neat. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing here. Kind of get these all bundled up. Something like that feels reasonably neat. And I'll run another wire through this zip tie. Now there is, I'm putting it on this side of the SparkMax on purpose. There is a button there which says mode that you may need to press. I've almost never needed to press that. So I think covering that up is okay. But I mean, I can still access it by pushing the wires out of the way. But the other side is a status light. And we want to be able to see the status light. So I'm trying to connect these on the side that won't block the status light. All right, now we just have 2 more problems. Somehow, well, we have 3 more problems. We have 4 more. Okay, we have a few more things left to do. They're not really problems. We have to get this wire to our can high and low here for the RoboRio. And the other one we have to get over to the power distribution hub. So somehow we need to extend these wires. And I think that is another job for the blue Molex box. Pretty sure there's stuff in here that's going to help us out. There is, this one is very long. This one I think is going to be perfect for our robot signal light. So if you find one that has 2 pins, you might want to hang on to that. We'll need that later. But for right now, looks like this is the one we want. So there's 1 bag in here, and I think this is what we want. I don't know. I'm going to open this bag and find out. But it looks like we just have cables that sort of match the cables that we've been working on. Yeah. Okay. They're just all neatly, I don't know, what is this? A wire tied up. And OK, it's got a little tag on it. But this is a 3-pin wire. But what I think we should see is if I take the whole side here and the pin side and I plug them in, they do match and they plug in. So we can use the wires in this baggie to extend our can wires to be able to plug them in. OK, so in this bag, I think everything is a different length. So if you find the short one, I think that's going to work because we almost made it right to the RoboRio. So if I plug the short one in here, and I'm always going to make white and yellow match and black and green match. We're going to go ahead and plug that in. And We've actually got one more clippy connector, so I'm going to go ahead and use that connector on this too. See if that actually fits. That did click in. That is definitely a little tighter than the other one, but it did click in and they're not coming apart, so I think that'll work. Okay, then this wire is going to come around here. See, maybe we can go under the power wires. Maybe we'll go on top of the power wires this time. So we're going to come around here like this. This is going to get maybe zip tied on there. And then we're going to end up cutting the end and pushing that into our RoboRio's CAN port. So let's go ahead and get a zip tie on here. I guess this is actually one of those, what do I want to do? I'm going to just zip tie right next to this. So I'm going to zip tie to the wires that are right next to the anchor here. You could cut the zip tie and put everything in. I just think that connector is going to be there, and so that's it's a little rough. Leave yourself enough for a loop, and then we'll go ahead and cut this. Now the red wire we're not using, so if you want, you can go all the way down to the bottom where the red wire is and just trim that. We're not going to use the red wire on this connector, and so we don't need any more of it than that. Okay, then let's strip these two wires. This wire feels like it might be 20 gauge. I think you can go down to 22 gauge at least for the CAN signals. But sometimes the thinner wires will not push in to these push-in connectors quite as easily. Now, it's labeled on here, L green, H yellow. Remember, white is yellow based on how we plugged it in earlier. And that did go in nicely, cool. And then black is green or low. And that is in too, cool. Okay, now our RoboRio is part of our CAN loop. Then let's go to the other side here. We've got our other wire coming off the other SparkMax. Somehow this has to get to over here. So let's see which one of these is a good length for that. I think the one I have here is definitely long enough, but is there one? This one feels good. This one feels too long. All right, so if we undo that, we can plug it in. Yellow to white, black to green. And we can either go around this way, or we can try to go under here. I like going around, even though it's longer, just because it looks like a cleaner path. All right, so let's start doing a few things. First, we need to not leave this connector the way that it is, because it could unplug. If you have you have one more box, I think, of Rev SparkMax. You could go get that last box and use that last clip. But I will show you just connecting it together with tape. And if you connect it together with tape and then also secure it nearby where your connector is so it can't move around too much, that's also going to work out. All right, so we'll get a little strip of tape here. And every time I do tape like this, I like to fold a little bit over on the end first. So there's a little tab to help me unwrap it in case I have to change this in a hurry at the competition. And then basically just make sure they're all the way together, get the tape seated, and we just wrap it until we get to the end. And then you can see I've got that little tab, so if I need to start unwrapping it quickly, I can. Okay, and these are going to go somewhere around here. So I said we definitely want to get it supported kind of around that connector. Let me see. Since we're working on this side, I can probably tip up the robot just a little bit here. There we go. So we get two zip tie anchors here. And I'll put one, I don't know, somewhere around here. And a second one. Right on the other end here. Okay, and then we can just go ahead and secure this to those anchors. That's good. And then we'll get this one. Changing directions, so I'll go the other way through this anchor. Good. So now this is also pretty secured because it is, we have the 2 anchors right next to it. I don't think that's coming apart. I'm not worried about it. Then we're going to run this all along here. So we want at least 1 more, maybe 2 more anchors along the way. Let's throw one somewhere midway here. And then this is going to duck underneath here. And you see, we're going to bend up and go in like that. So maybe 1 more anchor right at the end there to support it somewhere around here. Probably could use this other one that's right there too, but that's okay. Okay, so this, we're going to go through and then connect. So I want this zip tie to run this direction, I think. There we go. That one started. Okay, and then I guess we're going to cut it right about here. Okay, and you could go back and pull the red wire through everything to get rid of it. I'm just going to trim it back to the nearest zip tie here. The red wire doesn't connect to anything, so it's not like it's live. There's no power there. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just some extra weight and some extra whatever on the robot. If you remember, yellow is white and green is black. So we're going to go in like that. But of course, we have to strip the wires first. All right. Let's see if we need the little screwdriver or not. I am pushing down and it is not really moving for me. So let's grab the little screwdriver and push down on it. And we can get that wire in all the way. Tug test, looks good. And then the white one into the yellow or CAN high. And pull on that, and that looks good. All right, let me set this back down. That is our CAN network finished. We have 2 more things to do. So I can put these back away. Our robot signal light needs to connect to the RoboRio. And we need to run the Ethernet from our radio also to the RoboRio. I said in that Molex box, there was this long wire that has a 2-pin red and black connector on it. That, I think, is going to be the wire that we use to go from the RoboRio. So if you look at the RoboRio, there is a RSL port down here in the corner. And next to the RSL port, there are these 2 symbols. One of them says S, and one of them is, I don't know, it looks like a little umbrella maybe. That is the symbol for ground. So this is our signal, and this is our ground. So when we go to plug this in, black wire is usually always the ground wire. So we're going to plug that in this direction. Okay, and then this wire, we've got to get all the way up to our robot signal light. It looks like it is going to be long enough almost no matter which way we route it. Do we want to route it this way? Oh, that way is too short. Ooh, should have thought about this before. Okay, maybe we go this way, and then across, and then across, and then up. Oh, that's also too short. So if you just go straight across, and up, this wire looks like it might end up being just a touch short for us. Let me check our other wires back here. I bet you there is, well, nope. That's not going to work. All right, so we might break our rules, and we might go diagonally over some of this stuff just to get over there. So this is eventually got to get up there. OK, so we'll wire in the top section as we go. Let's also do the network cable as well. So you should also have an Ethernet cable. I just want to get these both started to make sure if they're going to go the same path, they can share the same zip tie anchors. So you should have an Ethernet cable. You can get any Ethernet cable you want if you have a different one. If you have one that is closer to the right size for what you need, that's fine. But I heavily recommend only using a brand new Ethernet cable for this. Okay, we're going to go to the radio here. And if you remember on the radio on the bottom, we talked about it before, but there are 2 ports. And one of them is labeled Rio, and one of them is labeled aux. And the Rio one is next to the power wires. So you're going to want to plug that in there. And it definitely seems like this is going to go down this way and then go over and plug into our thing. So these are going to go in different directions. But let's finish the Ethernet cable since that's what we are now working on. Definitely had some more zip ties. OK. Now, we could run this the same way as the other one. But what I think I'm going to do instead is I'll run it on a different set of lines here. Probably if we waited and we zip tied them all together at the same time, it might have been wise. But go ahead and use the other corner here and work our way down. And just, I mean, wherever you feel like it's time to add another zip tie, add another zip tie. You can go all the way down now to the bottom. OK. And this one, I can get another zip tie in, so I'm going to. But if you need to cut the one zip tie that's in this hole, you can do that. But I'm going to use the same hole that we used earlier. It seems like the right place to be. OK. Again, make sure we have slack everywhere. Can I take this out and put it back in? You know what? I think I don't like that one. So I'm going to clip the top one here that I put in. Take that out. I'm going to start lower down. I want a little bit more. Let's see, I'll push a little bit of the back through. I just want a little bit more around the area where we're going to be plugging in. So if I move down maybe to here, let's give that a try. So now I can unplug that. Yeah, that's a little bit easier to unplug and then line up and pop in. So that I'm much more happy with. OK. Then let's route across the robot. Here we can run a zip tie going the other direction in the same anchor. So that works. Same thing on this one. Zip tie in the other direction. That one is going to be the same direction, so yeah, let's go ahead and clip this zip tie and replace it. Just be extra careful when you're clipping zip ties that you don't get the wires. Let me get all of them at once. OK, the other end of this is going to plug in here. And we want to leave a relatively reasonable loop to be able to plug that in and unplug it. And what I'm thinking is we're going to just have this loop hanging out here. So I'll add a couple zip ties to this. One there. And then what I can actually do is I can bring this loop down a little bit. It's hard to say. I'm really tempted to zip tie it to the motor because the motor's right there. But the motor does create some noise. Electrical magnetic interference would be, I guess, the technical term. And that can potentially affect the signal. So instead, I'm going to bring it over here and use one more zip tie anchor. And I will zip tie it down to that. OK, that looks good. OK, radio is completely done. Let's go back to our robot signal light situation here and see what we can do about fixing that. We could potentially move the robot signal light too. That is an option. You could move this bracket and maybe attach it on the front of the robot, and then you could have a much shorter cable. But I guess for right now, we know we want basically all the length in this. I don't really want to add connectors to it if I can avoid it. So let's go ahead and plug these in the way that they're going to go into our plug. So remember, you can unplug this from the robot signal light. You can just pull it out. And we're going to need our screwdriver for this and the wire strippers. So let's strip the two wires coming off here of our really long connector. Looks good and looks good. OK. And then this is going to go into, if you look on the back, we have N, LA, and LB as the three plugs. N is for neutral. That's going to be our black wire. So go ahead and put the black wire in. And then you can use the flathead screwdriver again to screw down from the top. And that will lock down on that wire. Okay, that seems good. We can give it a tug. It's not going anywhere. Now, the red wire is going to go into LA, but we need to have a little jumper wire that goes from LA to LB. So we need a red wire that goes from LA to LB. So that and our initial red wire are going to go in here. So I don't know if you have still. If not, use we had this whole bundle of red and black wire that we've been using. I have one of those ends that I cut off at one point. So I'm just going to use that because this is more than long enough. And we're going to strip one end. Cool. And now we're going to put LA, the end we just stripped, along with the red wire that was coming up from our main cable. So those are both going into LA together. I was about to say make sure they're both all the way in and nothing falls out when one of them fell out. So I'll pick that up and put it back in. All right, so again, make sure they're both in there and they're both all the way in there. And then you can go ahead and tighten this down. This time, I actually want the screwdriver handle too. This one, we got to kind of crush both the wires, so it's going to take just a little bit more than when it was just the individual wire. OK, then this wire is just going to loop around and plug into LB. So let's cut it around here. Now, it could be very short, but if it's very short, it's hard to cut and strip the wire. So I'm going to leave myself a little bit of a bigger loop just to make my life easier. OK, and then we're going to go ahead and strip this wire. That'll do. And then this is just going to jump over into LB, stick it in there. And then we're going to screw it in. Perfect. Okay. That looks good to me. Let's go ahead and plug this back into our robot signal light up here, this way. If it doesn't go in, turn it around. And now we know kind of how much wire we have to work with. So let's work from the top down. The top, we don't really have much of a choice for what's going to happen. And then at the bottom, we'll just do what we got to do to make it connect. So first things first, I guess. I'm going to use a bigger zip tie. Since we have the hole that's here, I'm just going to go ahead and go right through that hole and use that to, start out our support here. Make sure you leave probably slightly more than I did, but leave a little bit there. We don't want that to be super tight. Okay, and then, I don't know, you can even bend this wire down a little bit so it's not sticking straight out and getting in the way. And we'll keep coming down. I think, let's see, I might as well use this hole because it exists, and I'm about to run out of pre-drilled holes. Okay, then we're going to end up with this wire going all the way down. I guess we're going to work our way this way. So we're going to end up all the way down to, and if I go straight down this post, I'm in trouble. So I'm going to go right down to the edge here. And I'm going to go all the way around the whole box this time with this zip tie. Okay. And then this is kind of it. This is what we're left with. So one thing I'm going to do, because I don't want this to unplug. Also, by the way, what I'm doing here with this wire, I would probably not do this if this wire were more critical. But if the robot signal light unplugs, your robot keeps working as well as it was working before. It doesn't actually stop working. So it's OK, I think, to make this one a little bit easier for us to connect. So I'm just going to put one of those tie wrap anchors right onto the RoboRio. These are removable, right? It is just a piece of double stick tape essentially under there. So I'm going to do this just so that we have some strain relief on this side. And then it looks like this whole thing is basically going to cut across the middle there, and I can join it onto my two zip tie anchors that I had over here. And the first one is open, so I can just attach to it. Going this way. And then the second one, I will have to clip the zip tie that's in there, and then I can connect this together with the CAN wire we put in earlier. So I get a zip tie through there, around both of our wires here. And then we'll zip tie that down. Okay, and then we're kind of crossing this whole divide in the middle. You can, if you want, I'll do one more, why not? Somewhere around here, I'm just gonna zip tie it down to the wires that are jumping across to the power distribution hub. And then that's not going anywhere. Okay, let's see, done, 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 done. All right, we're gonna clip all of these zip ties, get the robot out of the way, and then we're gonna come back. We have one thing left to do in this video, and that is I'm gonna show you how to wire up a battery. So we have batteries without these Anderson connector leads on them. We have to fix that. All right, so we'll be right back once all the zip ties are clipped. All right, you need your battery. There is a tiny plastic bag, I think, in each of the crates that has a battery. If I'm not mistaken, I think you get one in the black crate, one in the gray crate. So you got to find this little baggie as well. We'll do one battery as an example, and then, of course, you can repeat it as many times as you need. That said, even just 2 batteries, if you have the funds or first choice options to get a couple more batteries, you should do that. You can survive on 2 batteries. You can also borrow batteries from other teams at the competition, but it'll be more comfortable if you have a couple more that you can cycle through. Okay, so first thing is we need to add ring terminals again to our leads here. So I'm going to undo the wire insulation that's on here. And this is the exact same as what we did on the robot. So we get 2 more of these big ring terminals. and our crimper, and we'll just slide this on. Make sure nothing gets outside of it. And then we are just going to crimp the heck out of it. And I'll do it a second time just for good measure. Okay, that was one. And this is going to go, let's see, we're going to go like this and like this. So I want this one kind of facing this way. It doesn't really matter. You'll be able to kind of bend it around until it matches the way you want it to go. But let's crimp this one on. Same idea. All right. Then we need to be careful because these leads are exposed. Now, as you just saw, I can touch them, not going to hurt me. 12 volts is not really enough to drive the current through your body. So this is safe, but if I were to drop a wrench across those two leads, that would not be safe. That is going to spit out a lot of sparks and things like that. So we have to be careful now that this is exposed. So go ahead and open up your little baggie here. And I am going to temporarily take a piece of electrical tape. Just because I don't want, when I'm tightening the first bolt in, I don't want to accidentally hit the other side. So I'm just going to snip a little bit off of this and just kind of cover that lead up. Okay, and inside this bag there is a bolt. And you can put that through, and it doesn't matter whether you go through this side or you go through this side, whatever direction you want to go. Then we're going to do the color that matches. So this is the red one. And then on the other side of that, and you might want to, like, these leads can't rotate over like this. So you might want to put these in, I think I want to put them in straight up. But you can also grind or file the edges of these if you want to be able to have the leads at a different angle. But I'm going to go straight up on these, like that. Then you're going to put the washer, the regular washer actually, and then there is a split washer. So it looks like a washer, but it has a little cut on the end. So that's going to go on next. And then the nut. And the idea is that split washer is supposed to help lock. It's called a lock washer as well. That's supposed to help stop the bolt from coming loose. I think I might be just running out of hands here. Let me move over. Try it from a different angle. There we go. Huh. Why won't you start? There we go. All right, now these bolts do have room for a Phillips screwdriver to go into them. If you have to use the Phillips screwdriver, that's fine, in which case you need to assemble this the other direction, which is also fine. But I think it's much, much better to use the outsides again, just like when we were doing the wheels. I think if you do the outsides, you can tighten it down much, much tighter. A lot of times, especially if you get the wrong Phillips, there are a number of different Phillips sizes. If you get the wrong one, sometimes it slips out and you can't get this tight. And this needs to also be very tight. This is our main power, so anything that's loose here is going to cause problems for us later. So let's make sure that this is very snugged up. Not able to really rotate that at all, so I'm happy with that. Okay, and then I'm going to, we'll insulate this one first, and then we'll do the other side. So let's get ourselves some of the red tape. And we need to cover basically all of the metal stuff here. So I'm going to start up on the insulation that's there and just slowly work my way down. Try to get the bolt covered up as much as we can too. And this back section is probably the hardest part to get nice and covered up. I'm going to do one more time around. And then I'm actually going to work my way back up because that blob on the bottom is not super clean. But if I come back up to this area where it is pretty clean, that'll help hold everything together, but also make it look a little nicer. Okay, so there we go. That's one side. We can pull this tab off on the other side. We're going to do the same thing. This time, we could do bolt, washer, lock washer, and then I'll do this one from the outside. So if you're doing it with a screwdriver and you have no other option, then you can do it this way. Now the bolt heads, the outside of the bolt heads are 5/16 on both sides. So you would need two 5/16 wrenches to make this work. See if we can get it started. That looks like it got started. Cool. And let's go ahead and tighten this side down. That feels tight. And we're going to do the same thing with the black electrical tape on this side. I think if you only have like black electrical tape or purple electrical tape, it's okay if you need to just use that to cover it up. But since these both came in the kit of parts, it is definitely better if we keep our colors consistent. All right, just trying to get it to go lower into that little gap down there. There we go. Let's try one more time to get all the way down to the very bottom. There we go. Okay, and then I'll work my way back up to get a nice clean end. Clean end also will help keep it from unwrapping as well. All right, that is it. And this is going to basically be able to go into our robot now. Slide the robot over just a little bit back onto the table here. So we can now take the battery. We can drop that into our battery mount here. We can fish this wire over the top, through the little connector, back up in, pull it tight, and strap it down. And we're good there. Now we can plug this in and we can start testing stuff. So because we have the power switch and everything is secured, it's okay to just plug that in. And we can turn our power switch on. And when we do that, first of all, if you see anything like smoke or sparks, immediately turn it back off. I have voltage reading on my power distribution hub. Okay, and nothing else is lit up on the robot, and that's okay because we have our final step, which is we need to add the fuses and our breakers. So I'm going to turn this off for a second. And if you remember, in this bag, we had some fuses. There are 2 red fuses and some blue ones. Get the red fuses. We need those. The blue ones we're not going to use for this robot. Okay, and they're going to go down here in our power distribution hub. And remember, we plugged our radio into 21 and our RoboRio into 22. So we need to add power for those. If you look at the slot next to them, there are some like metal holes, and you just want to get the prongs of the fuse inside the metal holes. Sometimes you can force it on the side, and that's not good. Make sure you're inside. They're like little metal ovals. And you probably have to wiggle it back and forth to get it to go in. And just keep pushing. Make sure it's all the way down. Okay, we'll do that for 22. And 21. So I did 21, and now we're going to do 22. And wiggle it, make sure it's all the way down and flat. These need to be pretty stiff because we don't want them to rattle loose. All right, next thing is there is this bag of breakers. I think it's Snap Action Inc. circuit breakers. And there are 20 amp breakers. There are, I guess, 30 amp breakers and 20 amp breakers. But for the motors we're using and the wire gauge we used, we can use 40 amp breakers, and that's what we want. We want as much power going to our drive motors as possible. And the other one might as well get it. So we have these. They are listed on top as 40 amp. So that's what we're looking for. And all we're going to do is start finding where things are plugged in. So these wires here are plugged in port 0. So I'm going to take a breaker and push it into port 0. And these are also going to be tight, and there are also little metal ovals that you want to get these into. And you're just going to have to wiggle them down. They should get relatively flat. It doesn't matter which way you put them in, but I think I always have them facing towards where the white part, the white label, gets a little wider, just because they line up a little nicer that way. But it'll work whichever direction you put it in. All right, so that was 0, 1, 2, this is 3. My next set is in 3. It's also labeled on the outside, so you can read it right down here on the outsides as well. All right, so this one is 3. We're going to get that going. Man, that's tight, but that's good. It is supposed to be. All right, next one. That looks like I'm in 6. So we're going to go ahead and add 1 to 6 over here. I think that's all the way. Okay, and then 8 and 9. Oh, that missed. If it goes in that easily, it is not going in the right hole. All right, there's 8. And finally, number 9. Okay, now we're going to do the power test one more time. And again, everything is now going to get power. So we definitely want to keep an eye out for any signs of things going amiss, sparks, smoke, heat, etc. So we're going to go ahead and go back to our power switch over here and flip it on. And now what we're looking for is lights here. That's good. Lights on the PDH should show up on anywhere where we don't have a fuse plugged in. That's good. It's off everywhere we have a fuse plugged in. Perfect. Over here on our RoboRio and our SparkMaxes, we can see the RoboRio light. We have, there we go. That's our status and power light going here. We also see lights on our Ethernet port. That means we're probably getting a link, which is great. Every single SparkMax has a blinking purple light showing up, which is what we want to see right now. Well, any color light is going to make me happy. And then finally, up here on our radio, we've got a whole bunch of lights showing up. The power light, I think, is the very top light. And then system and I don't know what the last light is. I can't tell from here. But you should have a bunch of lights blinking there, and we'll go into that in more detail later. Your robot signal light, I think, should not be on yet because the robot signal light on our RoboRio is not turned on, and those should always match. So those are going to show up once we finish and download a program. All right, that is a completed and wired robot. I'm going to turn it off before I forget. So this robot is actually ready to start programming. I would recommend that if you were going to jump right to the programming video, that you are very careful, because not having bumpers on the robot means you can crash into stuff, you can hurt things, and you can damage the robot. So I do recommend following our next video, which is to build and attach bumpers to the robot first. But if you want to get your programming team started a little bit early, that works as well. So we'll see you in that next video, but before we go, we've got one more special thanks for Argosy for making this all possible, to First and Andymark for parts and support, and to Team 302 Lake Orion High School for hosting our studio.